My name is Naomi Quinones, Dr. Naomi Quinones, and I'd like to welcome you along with Nicole Canales, who I will be bringing up in a little bit, to the Fear Force and Family Separation, Human Rights Violations at the U.S.-Mexico border. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this later on, but first we all have a treat in store in that we have a local musician, Noe Montoya, who will be starting us out for a few minutes with a blessing song. So please, are you ready? So he's getting ready right now. Just a couple of things that you might want to know. There's restrooms on each side for men and women. We're going to have an intermission at about 1:30. And there will be food upstairs. We have a delicious food catered by the Bacchanalian Ltd. And if you can smell those beautiful smells of blueberry pie, it's coming from up there. So you will have your chance to avail yourself to that soon. So let me bring up Noe Montoya.
Hello, everybody. My name is Del Boy, my native name. I was asked to offer a blessing, and of course, I always love to bless our Mother Earth, our Father, the Son, and the elements for the life that we get. So, pues un bebito. Entro nahuake, trazo camate. Entro nahuake, trazo camate. Entro nahuake, trazo camate. Enikekatat nanati, tonatio totsatsi. Entro nahuake, trazo camate. Entro nahuake, trazo camate. Entro nahuake, trazo camate. Entro nahuake, trazo camate. Enikekatat nanati, tonatio totsatsi. Entro nahuake, trazo camate. Entro nahuake, trazo camate. Entro nahuake, trazo camate. Entro nahuake, trazo camate. Enikekatat nanati, tonatio totatsi. Entro nahuake, trazo camate. Entro nahuake, trazo camate. Entro nahuake, trazo camate. Entro nahuake, trazo camate. Enikekatat nanati, tonatio totatsi. Entro nahuake, trazo camate. Entro nahuake, trazo camate. Entro nahuake, trazo camate. Entro nahuake, trazo camate. Enikekatat nanati, tonatio totatsi. Entro nahuake, trazo camate. Entro nahuake, trazo camate. Entro nahuake, trazo camate. Entro nahuake, trazo camate. Enikekatat nanati, tonatio totatsi. Pomete. The words are in Nahuatl. We give thanks to Ometeo, the creator, the creative universe, the four directions, the four elements of life: water, air, earth, and fire. So without these elements, there would be no life as we know it. So we give thanks to everything created by Ometeo. Let's go.
Our ancestors here in Las Americas. I'm going to take the next 10 minutes to kind of give us a little bit of a blueprint of today. And we want to get on our first performance, which is with Alicia Di Palma, Morena Di Palma. So let me just talk for a few minutes. I wanted to welcome you here again, and this time with a focus on understanding that are resonating with each other. All of us are probably feeling our hearts hurting as a result of what's going on with the border, the separation of families, and also the children being incarcerated. We witness that every day. We all want it to stop immediately. We would like for it to just end, but it just seems as if the atrocious drama keeps on going on. You know, Trump was given an order last year by a federal judge to stop separating people, and the ACLU just reported that he had separated 900 people since then. So he's not going to stop this. And this feeling of powerlessness that we may have, I just want to say that the fact that all of us are here together for the same reason, resonating to support anything that we can that will end this, is a sense of power already. So we're creating our collective power. We're creating our power of the community right now. And there are some things that are changing. Maybe not right away, maybe not right now, maybe not next week, but we do have Congress people who have gone to tour the detention centers. We have had a number of people pull out of the private prison system. There's a number of legal actions that have been taken to stop this. And I think with time we will find that it will end. I've thought many times about during World War II, it was the Allied forces that liberated the concentration camps in Germany. Who is going to liberate the people who are in these prisons? It's not going to come from the government. It's going to come from us, people rising up. And it's no accident that we're here at the Japanese American Citizens League Center. To show how we tie into each other all the time is January. I had organized a similar event and Nicole Hernandez was there. And a couple of months ago, Nicole asked me, can we do something like that here? And she rounded up and gathered all of her community together to help us get this program out here for you, to be able to support and contribute to organizations that are helping people at the border. And along with that came the interest by the center, the Japanese American Citizens League Center, to open their center for us to have this program. So I want to thank Nicole Hernandez, give her a big hand. The Japanese American Citizens League, and Tim Thomas of this, who caretakes the center. Please give them a big hand. And the reason why I think it's so appropriate, we have a speaker, Tim Hasegawa, Dr. Tim Hasegawa, who will be speaking a little bit later on, but the connection is that Japanese Americans all over the country are resonating with this issue as a result of their historical experiences in detention centers. And it's, you know, part of what I think is this rising tide of people just saying enough of the inhumanity. So we're very fortunate to be resonating with our brothers and sisters here of the Japanese American Citizens League. I'll have more to say a little bit later on, but I do want to bring up the next performance. So I will leave you with a poem. I am a poet and also a professor, and that's how I got to know Nicole, because she's also a poet out there. Poet at large, but not a very large poet. And I'll read this poem for us. The new Warsaw Ghetto is around the corner on the Texas-Mexico border, down the street on the California border, the Arizona border. Publicly financed, corporately owned, government-operated enclaves of despair. The new Warsaw Ghetto metastasizes in the not-so-good-old USA, in detention camps, in cages, in isolated windowless prisons driven like spikes into the southern border. In the new Warsaw Ghetto, children are torn from their families and warehoused like animals, shivering under aluminum covers or left to sleep on unforgiving streets. In the new Warsaw Ghetto, tear gas smothers and the feds demother thousands of refugee children. They are red meat for the haters, for men of means and mean men who follow the fascist rules of ethnic cleansing. The refugees are brown and must be kept out, must be kept down. The country is full, he says, as if it's a hotel. No room for you, even though this is their land too, their America. They have journeyed 3,000 miles to escape their failed state, a legacy of U.S. interventions, dirty wars, torture, exploitation, and control. They have entered into a mouth of hatred, a tight sphincter of hostility. In the new Warsaw Ghetto, families disintegrate, disappear, desaparecidos. To the haters, I say, careful, lest you become a refugee of a fire, a flood, a mudslide, a drought, a tsunami, an earthquake, a tornado, a drought, a hurricane, a market crash, a massacre, a mortgage, a sinkhole, an eviction, a tyrant, a war. Careful, lest you become a refugee, forced to escape collapsing ports of entries from which there is no return. Careful, lest you become a refugee, desperate and stuck on an invented line, stranded on a slim island of terror, denied, denounced, dehumanized. Careful, we are all straddling fraying edges of uncertainty, of madmen, of natural disasters, eminent domains, and rash developments of Warsaw ghettos. Soon we may all be on the move in search of refuge from disintegrating societies and from the paralyzing devastation of human love. Thank you. Now I'd like to bring up, let me tell you a little bit about Alicia Morena de Palma's collaboration that she's doing today. She is a dancer and choreographer and a performance artist, and she's performed all over the world, including the US, Japan, Spain, and India. And today's piece is in collaboration with Amanda Chafin, a guitarist and dancer Terrence Farrell, and dancers Aline Sandoval Rios and Sarah Diaz Bassi. Please welcome this group.
Good afternoon and thank you. I wrote Tu y Yo, which means you and I, as a, actually it started with my guitarist husband, Roberto Andres, and we were sitting in a cafe in Alameda and he said, I want to encourage you to write something about today, because today marks the legislative gesture of Public Law 100-383, August 1988. It's the public apology and reparations for the gross injustice of Executive Order 9066. So I scribbled the beginnings on a cafe napkin, and I came out with a dance drama dedicated to the Japanese experience during World War II, expressed through Hondo flamenco dance, poetry, song, guitar, and recitations from original letters from internees from camp. And these letters were sent to their professors and teachers who kept them. And among the professors were Margaret Mead and Bertha Hudson Monroe from San Francisco State University. I also decided that I would do this in memory of the following. The Spanish Gypsies, 1939-1945. European Jews, 1939-1945. Pop and Miyako Toshiro, Mill Valley, California. They donated 100 cherry trees that were denied during the World War II conflict, and today these trees bloom on the roads in Mill Valley. Masayoshi Miyagi, Purple Heart, Aida Oahu, Herman Bottcher, Abraham Lincoln Brigade, and Guadalcanal, San Francisco, California. Alice Beatty Caffey, Nashville, Tennessee. Bertha Hudson Monroe, Professor Emeritus, San Francisco State University. Margaret Mead, anthropologist. And to all the peoples of the world, the incarcerated and separated families at our border who seek their basic freedoms, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So today, I've extracted some acts from scenes from Act 5 and 6. So we're going to begin with the solitude. So in this scene, there are 3 internees that are completely absorbed in their daydreams. They're in camp.
A mis soledades voy, de mis soledades vengo, porque para andar conmigo me bastan mis pensamientos. No, estoy bien y mal conmigo. Nos dicen mis pensamientos que un hombre que todo es alma está cautivo en su cuerpo.
To my solitude I go. From my solitude I come. Because in order to walk alone, my thoughts are enough. I am neither well nor ill alone. My mind says more, that a man who is all soul is a captive of his body. Internee 2, a young man.
Quisiera por ocasiones estar loco y no sentir que el ser loco quita penas, penas que no tienen fin. Aquel que fue poca cosa y que cosa llega a ser, quiere ser tan grande cosa que no hay cosa como él.
Sometimes I would like to be crazy and not feel. For being crazy takes away grief. Grief that has no end. He who has no one and becomes someone wishes to be the grandest without equal. Internee 3, a young woman.
Sigo y sigo mi camino, aunque mi alma quede atrás. Adelante, como el río que no puede parar.
I continue on my way, although my soul remains behind, onward like the river that is unable to stop. Now we have a dance called Salinas. And it's a woman's dance, the oldest lineage in flamenco. And the ladies are going to be expressing the range and moods of solitude.
There's something
American soldier in South Pacific campaign fatigues, walks on from stage right to center stage.
Captain Erman Botcher, Guadalcanal, April 2nd, 1944. The mere campaign staged against Nice and Nice alike is the most disgraceful thing imaginable. After all, we are fighting for freedom and justice for all people, regardless of creed or color. It is heartening to hear men here doing the fighting express disgust at the goings-on over there. I believe that the disloyal should be isolated, incarcerated, and dealt with, be they white Americans or of a minority. But the loyal and sincere should be accepted as full-fledged members of our society, regardless of their origin. Should I be lucky and return safely, we can hash this thing out. Japanese-American soldier in Army dress uniform walks on from side stage left, center front.
I heard that a contingent of Japanese Hawaiian boys are coming here to Camp Shelby to train for combat duty. We may get to see them, but as yet none of us knows what the outcome will be. Lots of boys 18 years and up are coming, and I've heard that a lot of married men have volunteered. I know my brother wasn't foolish enough to enlist, although he wanted to. Army life is tough, and with brother's eyes as bad as they are, I'm sure he's going to be working more at home in defense rather than in the Army. Yes, our group of soldiers is perhaps the most publicized outfit in the whole United States Battalion, but I don't know what will become of us. Yesterday, being Sunday and the birthday of my new bride, I attended church services and said a prayer for her and all my family. I often worry about my mother worrying about me, so on Mother's Day I wrote her in Japanese, and she was so happy. Voice 3, Japanese-American soldier in sergeant's uniform, walks on from stage left to center stage front.
Tomorrow, I'm going out to the U.S. military cemetery at Castel Fiorentino, where a few of my buddies lie. I don't know how I can take it, but I'm going anyway. The last time I went to the other place at Bara and thought to myself how futile was the effort of those boys because of the situation of our race, or should I say of our nationality. Yes, as they lie there in mute silence, never to get up again, I thought of what those boys would have given to have changed places with those few in the States who are race baiters. I wonder how they would feel if they came out here and saw these crosses with the names of Christians, Jews, Catholics, and Buddhists tagged on them. Names of colored people and those suggesting that their relatives came to America from England, France, Spain, Germany, Italy, and China, and any place one could mention. Yes, I wonder how they would feel.
Act 6, Pride and Loyalty. The scene is voice of a Japanese-American mother, and she's reciting a poem she wrote to America. I am a citizen. Let no slander slur my status. In the other war, I stood with countless others, side by side, to fight the foe. My arm was just as strong, my blood fell as bright as theirs, in the defense of a new world, more precious far than any tie of land and race. If in this Holocaust it be decreed, my loyalty be tested, my submission, what is the difference if the end be the same? My reason may be tested, but not my heart. I am a citizen. Let no slander slur my status. Steadfast I stand, staunchly I plant the stars and stripes before my barracks door, crying defiance to all wavering hearts. I stood with countless others, side by side, to fight the foe. My arm was just as strong, my blood fell as bright as theirs in the defense of a new world. Staunchly I plant, steadfast I stand, the stars and stripes before my barracks door. I am a citizen. Let no slander slur my status. My loyalty be tested by submission. What is the difference? If the end be the same, my reason may be tested, not my heart. Oh, what is loyalty if it be something that can bend with every wind? My arm was just as strong, my blood fell as bright as theirs in the defense of the new world. Steadfast I stand, staunchly I plant the stars and stripes before my barracks door, crying defiance to all wavering hearts. I stood with countless others side by side to fight the foe. My arm was just as strong, my blood fell as bright as theirs in the defense of the new world, more precious far than any tie of land or race. I, steadfast I stand, staunchly I plant the stars and stripes by my barracks door. My reason may be tested, but not my heart. Oh, what is loyalty if it can be something that can bend with every wind? I am a citizen, let no slander stir my status. I am a citizen. I can take the bad with the good.
Thank you so much. Let's bring up all of the dancers and all of the Just an amazing performance. And one of what I like to consider a unique approach here to these, to events like this is to bring up our local artists. It's just amazing, the treasure trove of artists that live in our communities. And so not only do we have a chance to support an extremely good cause, we also get to showcase for the audience pleasure, the artists in the community that contribute so much. Speaking of which, I'm going to bring one up right now. Nicole Hernandez is a Monterey-based, this is her home, she loves it. I would say educator, activist, and also a writer. She was major in terms of the direct action against the former sheriff Arpaio that happened last year. She was a major organizer for that. She's yes, thank you very much. She's also a PhD candidate at the College of Integral Studies in San Francisco, where she wants to research the women who work in the cannery workers here. And I do want to mention, before I bring her up, that this building itself has a lot of historical background for Japanese Americans in the Monterey area, and I think that might be coming up through either Chris or Nicole. So please welcome Nicole.
I did not plan on speaking today, but I do want to say a few words. Why am I here? I'm here because I'm an educator, and we have what is known as a teen mental health crisis across the country. We also have a particularly pernicious teen mental health crisis in Monterey County, where a huge number of the homeless population are youth. The homeless population in Monterey County surpasses that of the Bay Area. We always are hearing about the homeless in the Bay Area, but the homeless here in Monterey County, West White, am I wrong? Fact check me. Yeah, and a large percent of that is youth. I can say as a child of this community, part of that is generational trauma from not knowing your history. Those who study memory believe that the act of remembrance is not so much about the past as it is a preparation for the future. So why am I here? I'm a child of this community, a community that celebrates nostalgia instead of history, and a community with a series of pasts that have been erased. I do not need another souvenir keychain. I need more museums like the museum that is downstairs. I need more museums like the museum that is downstairs because I love too many who have turned into ghosts. What is a ghost? Ghosts are those who are not allowed to leave a trace. The history that is downstairs in this museum is a history that is not one of nostalgia. Nostalgia is for others. This is a history of a community that I never learned about in this community's public schools, much less the immigration history of my own family, which seems to only begin in the late 1950s and 60s with the Kennedy administration. Why? When we do not acknowledge trauma, we cannot acknowledge resilience. Erasure of trauma normalizes violence. It also erases differences. It turns into white pain that extends through the generations. This is what whiteness is and does in order to uphold power structures. Never again means never again. As a child of this community, I do not only demand to know this history, I demand that we do better. We need to look at the trauma, and then we need to look at the resilience in the community that attempted to come together downstairs in this museum. We need to have more programs in our public schools that support underrepresented minorities, in particular the Latino community. I find it appalling that Monterey Peninsula College and Hartnell, which has a large Latino population, has no Puente programs. Why? No support for Latino students that like the Puente program. Why? That our local schools have school resource officers instead of La Raza clubs. I teach at Lowell High School, which is an academic magnet school in San Francisco where students have to test to get in, and we are not perfect. We have a lot of problems, too, amongst, in terms of equity. But one thing we have done is have cultural groups, strong cultural groups that have made a difference. What's going on? We have a chance to change how the story ends, and we must remember we must do better, and we need to stop with the nostalgia. Really look at the history, what trauma does, and how we found resilience. We need to do better. That is why I'm here. Thank you. I can kind of get a little long-winded, so thank you. I am really excited to introduce to you someone who has been pivotal in reshaping this community. Dr. Chris Hasagawa is a retired CSU and B professor. He was a founding faculty, department chair, dean, and vice president. He is active on the Sparkles Union School District Board and on the board of the Pacific Road Natural History Museum. He is committed to bringing justice and kindness to new immigrants. And he's also a fan of one of my favorite writing teachers, David Murrah. So very excited to introduce Dr. Chris Hasagawa.
Thank you. We've had the music and the artistry. We've had impassioned speech. Now you get a little bit of history from the university professor.
For those of you that know me, you're wondering what the heck are we going to learn from a biochemist about the history of the area. You know, the whole issue of climate change, which is driving many of the people to move up here, is another conversation I'd love to have with you at some point. But today I want to talk about how it's important that we learn from history and we take what's happened before and use that as a model for not making the same mistakes. So, Eric, if you get that first one. I don't know if you can see this picture, but it's from the New Yorker. It's got a bunch of original Americans coming in, and in fact, Americans have always had kind of a weird relationship with the new neighbors that have moved in all of a sudden. They looked at them and they said, gee, they're awfully white, their food's a little bit different, they have a different religion, they speak a different language, and that's a little odd. What are we going to do with these new neighbors? I think that's natural for folks, but there's a long history of this kind of confusion. Next slide. So America's kind of had a love-hate relationship with the non-white immigrants, or the immigrants that would look differently than the people that showed up. The Native Americans had problems with rather pale folks that showed up, and then later on, the pale folks had trouble with people of other colors that showed up. Next slide. So I could spend a whole lot of time talking about, I need to be forward a little bit, talk about the different groups and how they were welcomed into the United States. But let's start with Native Americans. Native Americans, we all know the story of the Trail of Tears, and there are other just as heartbreaking stories that went on. And just yesterday, Representative Liz Cheney accused tribes of destroying our Western way of life because the court had mandated protection of the grizzly bear in Yosemite. It's almost incomprehensible to me that Native Americans are destroying our Western way of life. So there's been this back and forth problem for a long time. Let's take another group. Eric? Slavery. Slavery started in 1619 and then continued well into the 1800s. U.S. Congress outlawed African slave trade in 1808, but by 1860, they had nearly 4 million more than half in the cotton-producing states of the South. It didn't stop until the Civil War. Again, bringing in some new folks and not knowing quite what to do with them in terms of how we welcome them into the country. Next slide. Italian Americans, non-whites. It took, in March 14th, 1891, one of the worst mass lynchings in U.S. history occurred in downtown New Orleans. 11 men were hung or shot to death by a mob seeking justice for murdered policemen. And these folks are all Italians. The writing in the New Orleans paper was people of color were damaging their society, and they wanted to make sure that they stemmed that tide as quickly as they could. Next slide. A New York newspaper in 1890 said, "The floodgates are open, the bars are down, the sally ports are unguarded, the dam is washed away, the sewer is unchained, Europe is vomiting." In other words, the scum of immigration viscerating upon our shores. They weren't talking about Japanese. They were talking about Europeans coming into the country. Next slide. On the other side of the country, we had a problem with Chinese immigration. By 1853, 600 Chinese fishing people were fishing abalone right here off of Point Locust. That was one of the first groups of Chinatown. In 1879, California referendum voted to end Chinese immigration. And by 1882, that says 1882, Chinese Exclusion Act was in place until 1943, which meant that no more Chinese could come into California. Okay, next slide. My own folks, the Japanese Americans, by the 1880s, Japanese immigration was driven by farmer labor, just as the Mexican Americans have come into the country to do farm labor. The Japanese Americans, the Chinese Americans were brought in there. At one point when they decided they had too many Chinese coming in, they decided, well, let's bring in Japanese. And initially into Hawaii and then increasingly into the mainland. In 1895, the first sharecrop contracts in the Salinas Valley started happening, so the Japanese got here, made enough money so that they could sharecrop with American farmers. And then, next slide. This is a picture of one of the families that was doing that sharecropping. Next slide. And then California passed the Alien Land Law of 1913, prohibiting aliens ineligible for citizen. They were ineligible for citizens because they were Asians. From owning land and prohibiting aliens ineligible for citizenship from possessing long-term leases. So you couldn't have sharecrop situations. And then because the Japanese Americans, like the Hasegawa farm, belonged to my Uncle Ray when he was 1 year old, because he was born in the United States, so he was a citizen. His parents couldn't do it, so they moved the property into his name. A 1920 law required all persons purchasing land in someone else's name to prove that they were not doing so, to circumvent items of the 1913 law. And if you think about it, it's really hard to prove that you're not doing something. And those cases never made it too far in court. Next slide. Similar laws were passed in Arizona, Florida, Idaho, blah, blah, blah. You can read these better than I can. Most of these states, the laws remained in effect until the 1950s, which was kind of surprising to me when I found that out. Next slide, Eric. Bishop Charles Henry Brandt of the Protestant Episcopal Church in 1914 said that the United States is in far greater danger from the quality of immigration that comes from Southern Europe than those that could be come by Japanese and those in California and other Asiatic immigration. So in 1914, the folks on the East Coast were more worried about people coming from Southern Europe than worried about people coming from Asia. And there's a lot of writing where they talk about those colored folks coming in. Dark, swarthy, scary. By 1917, U.S. immigration laws categorized potential immigrants from Southern Europe by socioeconomic status, literacy, criminality, political beliefs, blah, blah, blah. And the way that they did this was they said to those countries, you can only send us people that meet these criteria. So it's your responsibility to send us the right people that we can accept into our country. It didn't make them very popular with folks from Southern Europe, Yugoslavia, Italy, those sorts of the world. The Immigration Act of 1924 limited the number of immigrants allowed entry into the United States to an official national origins quota. And as you see, that quota was based on how many were already here. So there's a percentage of the number of people that were already here that they would allow more people into it. And that quota system existed, well, it kind of still exists. And the idea is that they will set a quota for each group of people coming in. But in the case of, say, Germanic Jews, who in 1924 were thinking this is not such a great place to be, in the 1930s they're trying to get out of there. And the United States is saying, no, you're coming from Germany, but you're really from someplace else. And that someplace else, we don't have very many of them here. So you don't meet the criteria for coming into our country. And I'm going to tell you something a little bit more. It completely excluded immigrants from Asia, but for some reason set no group quota for Mexican citizens or for anybody really from North America or Central America, because they saw them as let's see what I wrote on the next slide. Yeah, so Mexico had been, the entire Western Hemisphere was exempt from these quotas, not because of the agriculture lobby, which was very powerful. Migration from the Western Hemisphere made up less than 1/3 of U.S. immigrants at that time, and their perceptions were that these folks were coming in temporarily, and then they'd leave, so they had no quotas on those folks. Next one. So, the idea of welcoming people into the United States is checkered at best for the United States, especially for folks that weren't Western European. Even people that I always thought Italians, and I left out a whole section on Irish because I just didn't have time today. But, to me, I always thought of those folks as white. But it was clearly something that historically the country's done. And then they've come back and said, this is not the right thing to do. These people are valuable. And they've established other kinds of programs to get people in, but it's always after the fact. If we keep an eye on our history, we don't have to go through this again. Okay, how about the issue of separation of children at the border? Next slide here. So after a visit to a Texas detention center housing immigrant youth, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights said on July 8th, she was deeply shocked by the conditions facing the children. And I'm not going to go through and catalog those because you all have seen that in the paper and read about it. But if you look at American history, she'd be less surprised. Next slide here. Children of slaves obviously belonged to their masters. They didn't belong to their parents. And so atrocities to children was part and parcel of that organization. In the early 1900s, children of the poor, displaced, kids that were coming from broken homes, and that is a thin disguise for immigrant children coming into the United States, were offered as indentured servants. The only way that they could get out of jail was if somebody took them on, and then they served as slaves for the rest of their life, trying to pay back the food and the clothes and the housing that they got. In 1939, the U.S. literally turned away a ship of 900 German Jews. Shortly afterward, it rejected a proposal to allow 20,000 Jewish children to come to the U.S. for safety. Look at that, 1939. World War II, about to break out. These Jews are being oppressed in Germany. So they tried to come to the United States on a ship, I believe, called the St. Louis. And the ship was turned away because we already have our quota of Jews coming into the country. Maybe they'll have better luck in Cuba. On their way to Cuba, Cuba changed all the laws. Especially one kind of an egregious thing was they said, you know that form that you already filled out, you filled out on the ship coming over? We require a different form now. And you're on a ship. So they got turned away, came back, and actually went back to the United States, back to Europe. And the lucky ones got off in Great Britain, but many of them were sent back to countries that the Germans overran and ended up in Auschwitz. Of that 900, nearly half of them ended up dying in Auschwitz. In the early 1900s, immigrant children with eye disease, TB, or intellectual deficiencies could be separated from their parents at the ports of entry in the United States. Native American children were routinely taken away from their parents and sent to boarding schools to become American. This idea of separating children from their families in the United States as an immigration process is not new. It's something that's been going on for a long time. And in each of these cases, we've come to regret what happened, but we're not learning from our history. Next slide. In Trump's first year in office, they, the INS, quietly started testing family separation as a sort of shock and awe to act as a deterrent to families thinking about coming and crossing the border. Think about that. The government policy is we're going to take the children away from the families so that fewer families will come to the United States because you know what's going to happen to your kids. Seems like a bad policy for a country. Seems like a bad policy for our country. They decided they were going to charge the parents with illegal entry and lock them up. And once they're in federal prison, the kids can't stay with them. So they would take them and have them removed and sent away to another camp. And next slide here. In May 2018, Attorney General Jeff Sessions, and you probably all remember this, went down to the border, and at the border made this proclamation that we're going to have this zero tolerance policy. And they made that policy official. Before they were doing it, it wasn't on the books. Now it's on the books. In June 2018, President Trump signs an executive order stopping family separation. 6 weeks later, he's discovered there's too much political pressure. This is going to be a problem for him. And he stops it on paper. DHS, which depend, so they do that for that group, the people that have been separated during those 6 weeks. DHS looks at them and they say, well, we had 2 different agencies in the government that were responsible for this. The Department of Homeland Security sent these folks back to wherever they came from. And the Department of Health and Human Services housed the children. We don't know where those parents are anymore. How do we get them back together? It took months and months of research and people going down to Central America to find the parents so they could reconnect those children with them. And nearly today, nearly all of those children from that 6 weeks have been reunited in that original group. But it took 6 months to undo the damage of the 6 weeks. And then the Federal Inspector General revealed in January that the government may have separated thousands more children from their parents of the border than we knew about. In other situations, either before the proclamation, after the proclamation. So this reporting in June 2019 is just shocking, clearly showing that we're not learning from our mistakes. Next slide. And then people said that, well, other administrations have done this. But in fact, before Trump, immigration agents separated families primarily when they determined that a parent was a danger to the child. A federal judge in South Texas is quoted as saying, even when parents were prosecuted for illegal entry, the Border Patrol, as a rule, did not take the kids away and send them to shelters across the country. These kids were in shelters in Chicago, in New York. They're not there in El Paso or any place close. They've been sent out to Department of Homeland and Health and Human Services facilities across the country. And they didn't do it under Obama. They didn't do it under George Bush. They did it under Trump. Next slide. Okay, so let's take another topic. And one that really got me involved in this personally was the topic of concentration camps. First slide. Oh, and the one that did it for me was Fort Sill. My father-in-law was in a concentration camp. He was in prison in Fort Sill. Actually, it wasn't my father-in-law. It's my father-in-law's father. He taught kendo in his community, so he's viewed as a community leader. And then they sent him to Fort Sill, where he was housed with German prisoners of war. And he was asked to sign the statement that said, do you forego all allegiance to the emperor? But his thinking was, and all of his buddies just signed it and went back to Arizona to the camps. But he thought to himself, my new country just sent me here. You know, I live in America and they just sent me here. If I forego my allegiance to Japan, who do I belong to? Where do I go? What happens if things get worse? And so he wouldn't sign the statement and was held there for almost 2 years. Never being charged with anything, just surviving. So Fort Sill kind of rang the bell for me. And when they said they were going to use that as a camp for the kids, it was just like, gotta get involved. So, what is a concentration camp? It's a place where large numbers of people, such as prisoners of war, political prisoners, refugees, or members of an ethnic or religious minority, are detained or confined under armed guard. That's not to say that there are all sorts, most people, when they think of concentration camps, they think of what happened in Auschwitz. And that was awful. But any place where you bring together a group of people and don't charge them, no due process, there's armed guards so they can't leave, and they're all of the same ethnic or religious persuasion. It's a concentration camp. Next slide. People ask about concentration camps, and the two, as I've done this talk more and more, two conversations that I've gotten involved in a lot was people say, are or were reservations the same as concentration camps? That's a long conversation. So I'm not going to go into that today. And if I ignore your question on that, we can go out for a beer later. Were the worst camps the Auschwitz camps during World War II? a lot of people want to compare what happened in different kinds of camps. And I'm uninterested in that conversation because I think that it's not whether or not you're putting people in gas chambers or you're putting them on desert that they can't farm or you're putting them in Arizona when they grew up in Santa Monica. The idea of having concentration camps is a policy that the United States ought not to be engaged in. This took me by surprise. I read a book by John Poland, Adolf Hitler, the definitive biography, and he says, Hitler's concept of concentration camps, as well as the practicality of genocide, owed much, so he claimed, to the studies of English and United States history, particularly what happened with the Native Americans. And he saw a clear pattern here that he was able to use with the Jews. Well, that's a sobering thought. Next slide. So this is going to a more personal place. In December 7th, the Executive Order 9066 was issued where everybody of my persuasion had to go and leave their homes and go to these camps. I'm going to show you a couple of slides here. So 9066, the government placed restrictions on Japanese Americans and their movements. They allowed the military to intern them as they felt necessary, and they put this Lieutenant General, John DeWitt, in charge of it. And so John DeWitt went to speak to Congress to try to get funds for this project, and he said, a Jap is a Jap. They are a dangerous element. There is no way to determine their loyalty. It makes no difference whether he is an American. Theoretically, he's still a Japanese. And you can't change him by giving him a piece of paper. So, Japanese Americans, whether or not you were born in this country, no matter where you came from, this was the guy in charge. Next slide. So here's my folks. Aren't they cute? Mom was 20 years old when this happened, just graduated from Santa Rosa Junior College. Dad was 26 and just been accepted to Southern California School of Optometry, which is in Los Angeles, which was on the other side of the line of where he could go. So I just want to say, my dad was a great dad. He was a wonderful farmer. But I always wonder what might have happened had he gone to pursue this line of work and been able to continue the training that he was into. Next slide. My grandfather was taken to a military prison in Bismarck. This is my grandfather, and held in 1944. He was never charged with anything. He was taken there because he was a community leader because he taught English to the other Japanese. And he returned really a broken man. He was never able to communicate with his children again. He was spiritually broken and never the same. In this area, they took folks to the Salinas Armory. Next slide, Eric. The Salinas Assembly Center, also known as the Salinas Fairgrounds, as some of you have seen. You'll notice the horse stalls in the middle of the circle. They put them on trains, they pulled down all the blinds, they sent them out to the Arizona desert. And you see the ones with the triangles are the places that they chose. And if any of you have ever been to these places, they're not places that I'm choosing to build a house. My folks were in Poston in Arizona. My wife's family was in Manzanar, and most of the folks from around here were also in Manzanar, those kinds of areas. Next slide. This is what they found in Poston. This is a picture of the buildings that had been put up, ramshackle buildings when they, I don't know if any of you have ever been to Manzanar, but the wind blows kind of constantly. There's holes in the walls so that they were covered with sand. Matter of fact, they said they could see the outlines of their body when they woke up in the morning. That these long rows of barracks, they learned their block number. Next slide. And go ahead, press it again. So 110,000 persons were removed for reasons of national security. Some people suggest that that number is as high as 130,000 Japanese and Japanese Americans. Most of them were school-age kids, infants, and young adults. But my folks were right at that cusp. Think of where you are when you're 20 and 25. You're forging the foundations of the rest of your life. And they got taken off to a camp. The detention center families lived in substandard housing, had inadequate nutrition and health care, and had their livelihoods destroyed. And many continued to suffer after their release, like my grandfather. So Dad had this interesting story. He used to tell us that, in 1936, when he turned 21, he, like every other red-blooded American, he was raised in the United States in Sanger in Fresno County, and his dad told him, don't even learn to speak Japanese because we want you to be an American. He went to his first grade class, and the first grade teacher said, I can't say Kaoru Hasagawa, so your name's Peter. And he came home, and his dad said, great, you've got an American name. That's perfect. And everybody got names that way. My Auntie Helen, who was younger than my dad, used to meet everybody at the end of the driveway saying, what did you get? What did you get? So that she would know her brothers and sisters' new names. He tried to join in 1936, but at that time they were only recruiting Japanese Americans who spoke Japanese. And he didn't because they needed them for translation purposes. So they denied him. In 1941, Pearl Harbor hit. He tried to go into the army again. And they said, no, you're too Japanese. We're fighting the Japanese. We don't want you. Dad said, I wasn't Japanese enough, and then I was too Japanese. So he gave up on the idea of being in the army. In 1944, at age 28, he's married, he has a son, and they drafted him and sent him to Europe. So Dad ended up being in the army. When they came back, they were greeted by signs like this in different kinds of places. Next slide. And they weren't welcome back into the community because after a little while, in the camps, where were they going to go? They were in the middle of the desert. They took away the soldiers and stuff like that. And then at one point they said, we're going to close the camps. So you guys need to find your ways back home. So they're greeted by signs like this. Next slide. So Tim Thomas, who we introduced earlier, is the guy that's keeping track of our hall, is also a historian, a very important historian to those of us in the Japanese American community. Downstairs here, right, Tim? He found a little document from 1945, which was a collection of petitions calling for residents of Monterey to ensure the democratic way of life of those of Japanese ancestry who would be returning to their homes on the Monterey Peninsula in the months ahead. Next slide. And here's an article where a bunch of people signed in Monterey something in the paper that said we should welcome the Japanese Americans back. Mostly the fishermen that worked with the Japanese Americans, Italian fishermen, Sicilian fishermen, and then some pretty notable folks. Next slide. Like John Steinbeck, Ed Ricketts, Edward Weston, Clovis Wilson, Weston, that guy. Yeah. And so anyhow, a bunch of people signed this thing and it was in the paper. And Tim found that, here, a petition that had that sign. And it was a marvelous thing for everybody in my community. On the other hand, in Salinas, there was a different reaction where the Monterey Bay Council on Japanese Relations filed articles of incorporation to discourage the returning to the Pacific coast of any person of Japanese ancestry. Those are the farmers on that part of it. Now, there were good stories and bad stories all mixed in here, individual things where people took care of the Japanese farms. And, I want to weigh that a little bit into this story. But the petitions that we saw that Tim found were the only ones that happened in the United States. And this was the only place where the Japanese Americans were welcomed back. And this hall, in a way, is a monument to that interaction. For those of you that haven't seen, downstairs, there's a wonderful museum that Tim's put together and is curating about the Japanese American history here in the Monterey County. Ronald Reagan, in 1988, signed the Civil Liberties Act, which was the first step on the way towards reparations and apologies to the Japanese Americans. And because I'm running out of time, I'm already way over time. I want to show you this picture of CSUMB. This was a mural by a guy named Chiro Obata, who was an artist in the camps. And during the late 1990s, the 2000s as we call it, the aughts, CSUMB, like many campuses, were buffeted with the process of people saying, oh, we need to do something about these Muslims, get these Muslims out. And part of putting up this particular mural and getting support from the Japanese American communities to support our Muslim American neighbors, we would go shopping with them, we would do things with them so they didn't feel alone. And that was a really important thing for me. So let me close real quickly with 3 quotes. Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Just like Leon. Let's not be those people. Let's remember the history of our country and know where we made mistakes and not do it again. Next one. Margaret Mead, this is my favorite quote. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And finally, Dr. King, in the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. Let's not be silent. Let's remember our history. Let's speak out and be active to support what we know is right. Thank you very much.
Back on that and have this idea of let's not be silent. Please say this after me. We must endeavor to end the dehumanization of innocent people. Everybody please say that. End the dehumanization of innocent people. Decriminalize migration.
Decriminalize migration.
Ban incarceration of people.
Ban incarceration of people.
Stop the separation of children from their families.
Stop the separation of children from their families.
Shut down the concentration camps.
Shut down the concentration camps.
Outlaw private prisons.
Outlaw private prisons.
And question the ever-increasing militarization of the border.
Question the ever-increasing militarization of the border.
Right on.
Right on.
I just also want to thank Dr. Hakanella for such an amazing speech. So much of the history he was talking about has a direct connection here that's not spoken of. I got a little excited taking a photo of that slide because Barbara and Elwood Graham's son is one of my friends. And I was telling him about this event and the museum and that list of people, and I said, I bet your mom and dad were on there. And he said, I never heard about it. Yeah, so. That's what I mean when I say erasure. And we need to know this history so we can do better. Why is it not being taught in our schools?
Exactly.
Why? Is it because they do not want students of color to do better in a way that colorizes themselves, or do they just want us to be all whiteness, erased? Before I go on a rant, I'm going to introduce my next speaker, our poet. Davis Mendez, I'm very proud to know. He was born and raised in Monterey to immigrant Americans. He works in restorative justice, and when he is not poeting, he is a full-time student at Monterey Peninsula College, and I'm so proud to have him here today. He also saved the day this morning and really helped me out in a pinch, so I'm super excited to introduce him. David, bring it up.
How's it going? Great. Tell me about your life. Okay, so I'm going to read some poems to you guys, but before I do that, I'm going to tell you a little something about, like, a couple of things. First off, I mean, I'm sure if you guys are from around the area, you guys have seen the very stark contrast between Pebble Beach, Monterey, Pacific Grove, and then Seaside, Marina, and all those other places. And that's something that people really need to look at. But also on the other side of that coin is gentrification of Seaside in places like Watsonville, right, where people's rents are going up. You know, as we speak, you know, there's like coffee shops, like, you know, really trendy coffee shops opening up over there. There's like all kinds of different stuff that is raising the rent on people. And because of that, I feel like there's a bigger conversation to be had, and it can't be solved with simply platitudes, you know? So I'm gonna read you a couple poems, and you're gonna bear with me because I barely put the finishing touches on this poem. But here we go. En el Cerro de San Bernardo, a woman is dead. Her body the color of tierra buena, belly down, el arroyo coating her in a slow transparency. Abajo de una cobija de agua, the sun's light is held in disbelief. Her son in the States works in the kitchen making triple-digit dinners for 7-digit people. They split the tips 12 ways, but he works American. If he wanted to, he could buy land. If he wanted to, he could support a family. If he wanted to, he could open up a taller. Pero no. His mom liked to share that her son worked at a fancy restaurant in una ciudad rica en los Estados Unidos con los güeros. He came with a friend, un borracho escandaloso, who always invited him a pistear outside the apartment he shared with other men from el Valle Central de Oaxaca. Siempre una fiesta in the lot of the apartment complex, little prietos y güeritos, güeritas y prietas, dividing themselves up and scheming, whispering in ESL English. Su primo Miguel plays soccer at the park con amigos y socios, gambling on the curb near their pickup trucks, rapping Spanish, remarking on joggers' curves. One day, su hermano was on the news, arrested for a theft, brought to face a white judge, sentenced to the upper term on his first felony. His abuela, who was here before the mall, keeps a Ziploc bag of quarters for the bus in the lining of her jacket. Never cared to drive, walks since she crossed the Sonoran. Walks the hotel aisles, pushing a cart of towels, soaps, and little packets of shampoo. She saves her money. For terreno en la valle, for a house, to raise enough money from the nation of marauders that plundered her country, to return to her country. Porfirio Diaz held no place in his heart for the mestizo, his own people, his own struggle. She remembers a story her grandfather told her. During el Porfiriato, pigs would clean their behinds, for they could not afford a toilet nor its paper. And as she grew in her little place in El Valle, she gained a toilet and its paper and nothing else under the charcoal strangle of El PRI. The massacres of Tlatelolco, Corpus Christi, Tula, Actial, Guerrero, los jóvenes de Ayotzinapa, the femicides throughout the country perpetrated by macho men incapable of respect and empathy. This country is a horrible desert in which oases and mirages of fiesta lurk in free space for those without work. Porque aquí no hay trabajo, pero siempre hay fiestas. In one of these fiestas, our woman was taken, strangled, and beaten and thrown in the river by a stranger, by a madman, who fed on the towering darkness of Mexico. It, a shadow of the American empire. Immigrant, take shelter in your abuser. Take shelter in the hearth of your murderer. Your land is on fire, fueled by American lust for cash and power. Your land is on fire, and your children run north. Your fire has spread to the south, and their children run through your fire into the arms of their villain. If you cannot beat them, live amongst them in fear. Mexico, child of blood and struggle, of revolution and starvation, mestizo country, when will you heal? When will you reach the end of your dramatic birth? And this is a poem in connection to the last one, where the kid went to prison. So this was called Apart Together Forever. Men in their best state blues, hands clutched at their backs like monks in a barbed line. You pass through a gate to be allowed through a door where you are stripped and told, open your mouth, raise your tongue, shake your hair, behind your ears, lift your sack, turn around, lift your left foot, right, squat and cough. Next, you spent your morning at work on your presentation only to look recently dressed every time. You see your mother's round face, a rictus of imminent laughter, and the disinterested face of the man you now call father, and your sister's bored, annoyed. No one wants to be here. You sit at the low table, your lap in hands for all to see, unsure for years of being able to talk to your family for longer than an hour. So much of your life spent in silence, surrounded by the people there in that room with you. Everyone in this room is talking at once, but it's your parents' voice you cannot hear. Only momentarily you enter a world, not the world you are in, when all forget the eyes of the guard, hunched with your Uno cards as couples, families walk the perimeter of the room like convicts the yard. A lifer with a bald head and a tatted chest told you he held his mother's hand throughout the visit. So you hold her hand. But affection is unnatural to you. Calloused and clammy, from kitchen floors and toilets, you feel the work that went into your vending machine breakfast, your books and canteen, your drugs and debts, your packages and music, your pruno and white lighting, all that served as walls or sledgehammers to your sanity. You hold your mother's hand. You've always been her son. This was the consequence you might have earned as the consequence they might have earned. You experienced life through rumor in these rooms or opposite ends of reinforced windows. You heard of your favorite uncle's suspicious death, a handsome, young, and drunk man shot in the neck over love, then dragged onto the bed of a truck by his brothers, quadriplegic till the day he died of an overdose. Long conversations with him on his piss-stained bed, whose laughter was a torch you carried in your dark heart. You heard of a cousin's incarceration, she just as troubled as you, who taught you things you probably should have never known. Of land disputes, your tío Daniel mad on mezcal, waving his pistol in the air like a hallucinating veteran of La Revolucion. Of sabotage mayoral campaigns, all your family's shame nailed to doors like the hands of Cicero, as caution to those contra el PRI. And all the lectures about yourself, el hijo de puta, el hijo de tu chingada madre, your father's son, your stepfather's son, your illegitimate stepfather's son. Then the guard yells, wrap it up. As you stood there, a number of wretched longing with your final kiss and hug, your mother's arms, its cells, did not mingle with the cells in your arms, as though you were separated by the throat of all volcano. Of men in violence, of steel doors and concrete walls, of dirt yards and dog runs, of batons and pepper spray, and nothing you spoke and nothing you touched could jump that hell. Not holding your mother, but screaming in outbursts of rage and madness, haunting them through letters and phone calls and weekly visits. You were called away, hands squeezed behind your back as though you could pop them, because you wanted to feel, and you wanted to feel, and you wanted to feel so much. You were called away to your yard, to your building, to your cell, to your eyes, to your skull with your fear, waiting to cross over as though there were a bridge in your heart. One last thing is that California, like a lot of American states, have a school-to-prison pipeline. If you guys don't know what the school-to-prison pipeline is, when they arrest kids for pretty much anything, and then they sort of mess them up for their entire life, right? And it mostly affects low-income, whites and black and brown people. So there's a lot of things that can be done. We're at this event right now, and this is great. But start writing your congressman and start getting some laws changed, because none of this is gonna mean anything if we don't, like get involved and start, like, doing direct action. So thank you guys for coming out. I'm Davis, and thank you guys.
Just want you to know that, once again, let's have a hand for Davis. We have one more performer, a poet, before we break for intermission, but I want to bring your attention to the fact that we have material and we have books on these little tables behind us. We're looking at UFW books. We also have, pamphlets about them. We also have a book by Shizue, who is editor of the Civil Liberties anthology. That's back there as well. Also, Davis has some books, chapbooks for sale, so they're there if you want to check it out. But if you're interested in any more information, direct actions regarding this particular issue, please put your email, sign your email, and we will send you some information about what is going on in our local community that has this larger hemispheric effect. And it looks like Nicole wants to say something. Yeah, let me just say a few more things then.
Yeah, we're on.
Hold. Okay, we'll do a break, but this will give me a chance. By the way, when we do the break, please go upstairs. That's where the food is. It's by donation only, so it's great food. I just want to say a few more words about migration. Human beings have been migrating for thousands of years. This is how we get around the world. So with the advent of sovereign states, we have these artificially produced borders, and this is where we've gotten into a lot of trouble, because especially this hemisphere, which is Las Americas. To me, I'm American because I'm in the continent, and I was born and raised, and my family is from the continent of Las Americas. And too often we separate America as being a white place, and people who basically occupy the larger part of this hemisphere as being somehow un-American. But if you go to Mexico and Latin America, people will definitely make a difference between Norteamericanos, Suramericanos, and Central Americans. So we need to keep that in mind, and also the human desire and need for migration when it calls for looking for your family for survival and a place for food and things like that. So let's take a look at why people are migrating from Central America right now. There was a really good article that I checked out that put it very succinctly. And not only are people here who are coming here, not only do they not deserve this kind of treatment that they're getting at the border, the United States owes them. Are people in Central America and Mexico fleeing gun violence? Well, that's so. The U.S. is the source of 70% of the guns used by criminals in Mexico and nearly half in Central America. Are they fleeing gang violence? Many of the Central American gangs gained strength when the U.S. deported Central Americans who had been recruited into gangs in Los Angeles and other U.S. cities. After fleeing civil wars we precipitated, we bear some responsibility for such organized crime. People are fleeing illegal drug-related gang violence. The U.S. is responsible for the major part of drug use in the United States. The United States creates the demand for the drugs that get trafficked through Central America and Mexico. Are people fleeing government repression? The U.S. government has armed and heavily funded the governments of Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala. We provoked a civil war in El Salvador We supported a coup against the elected government of Honduras in 2009, and then backed the fraudulent election of the current Honduran president in 2017. We oversaw the genocide of indigenous people by the Guatemalan government in the 1980s. So political refugees fleeing US-backed regimes deserve special consideration for asylum. Our people fleeing land grabs. Multinational firms have taken over their land, the land in Central America and Mexico, for industrial farming, mining, or tourism, and threaten those who resist displacement. U.S. Hilton Hotels has displaced hundreds of native Garifuna people in northern Honduras for an exclusive resort. And one, I think, of the larger issues that I think everybody's going to be facing is climate change. Right now, all over the world, we're seeing how seas are rising, droughts are occurring. Well, the droughts have hit Central America very badly. So what it's doing is it's causing people to look for other ways of making their livings. And those who come here to the United States, I think, also need some form of assistance in that the United States pretty much is responsible for at least 60% of the carbons that create or lead to climate change in the world. So we're seeing that we're not in a vacuum here. Migrants are not in a vacuum. This is a cause and effect situation that is occurring. And the more we inform ourselves about this, I think the more we can be compassionate and empathetic to the needs of the people who are coming here.
I am really honored to introduce Equipto, who is a hip-hop artist and community organizer who fights for human rights, mainly focused on police accountability, and he's born and raised in San Francisco. He is special to me for several reasons. One, because he has been the mentor of one of my former students who just has had an amazing journey and has now become a radio personality and a comedian, and comes back and talks to my kids about, taking advantage of the resources around them at our school and being proud of who they are, and that is really important to me. Equipto also started at the Black and Brown Community Center on Valencia Street a hip-hop night that was youth-friendly. And that was something that the youth of San Francisco, that's becoming largely a city that's so heavily gentrified, Black and brown kids need their own space. They need a safe space. They need to be seen and heard and be able to be celebrated, and that was one of the things. Are you guys still doing the comedy cypher? You stopped it. And he also started a hip-hop school, schooling the youngsters about what is the history of hip-hop in San Francisco. What is your history? So those are some of the many reasons that I admire Equipto. He is also one of the 5 activists who went on a 17-day hunger strike against police brutality in 2016, called the Frisco 5, that averted violent protest because the San Francisco still needs huge change. There were huge problems, and the community was about ready to just turn into something really, it was about ready to explode, and the Frisco 5 protest kept everybody in peaceful protest, and we wish that the system could be changed that quickly, but it did create some change, and it inspired me. So, lastly, one of the reasons is that he is the child also of educators, and also the child of educators, I have a deep appreciation for what it means to be a child of educator, going out there and forging your own name and reaching out. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Equipto. Thank you so much.
Intro, that was incredible. So, I go by Equipto, represent San Francisco, California. It's an honor to be here in this building. And out here actually too, because I know the struggle is international. It's going through in San Francisco, the Bay Area, happening all over. Dealing with displacement, gentrification, oppression on our people. Chief Justice and Mike Marshall in the house. Check it. I got love for all those that feel my struggle. When you have got no choice, man, you still won't hustle. And anybody that's blind, they really can't see. Just to stay driven and trying to live the same dream and say it's all political. Besides that, we all got issues. Capture your visible, but don't let this cold world get you. We ain't taking shit no more. We gonna pick that landlord. Time to organize, just showing them what we stand for. After chief, though we all for peace, the beach still lives. Looking at the war police, for all the homies trying to live, but it's hard to smile. To the parents that's alone, cause they lost their child. I'ma keep you on my mind, doing more than trying. But I think about the children that's dying in Palestine. Rest in peace to the brother, my heart goes to the mother, and any other victim that don't deserve to suffer. I got love for those that sacrifice themselves for a bigger cause, cause they know in life is real. I got for the hustlers that's far from home, trying to get their thing cracking all across the globe. I got love for all of those in the same shoes. Anybody recognizing that you must pay dues. I got love for those set back from the beginning, and they never got a taste of this better living. I got love. If you got love in your heart, make some noise, y'all. Make a little bit hard. Sometimes our love gets depicted as hate and agitation, and we're attention seekers, when it's really just love for our people. We wouldn't be protesting if it wasn't for the oppression that they impose upon us. It's all for love. This for the working class families and all those that come from a working class. Listen to this. Send power to the working. Send power to the workers. Goes power to the. Let me tell you who this is for. This is for the janitors, the mailmen, bus drivers, school teachers, parents grinding to get the kids some new sneakers, pay less just to have more to bargain. Stand firm when it's a flop like James Harden, man. My fam's starving and living on a prayer. Going tired of getting paid for our labor and yelling at that mayor and all staff that dare cross the picket line. To all you artists in the studio just speaking rhymes, steady complaining about the system's condition and acting like your song's really gonna make a difference. With being there treated like a real life monopoly with broken promises and outdated policies. Workers on strike. What happened to the union? Artist revolution. But if we don't do shit, we ain't going nowhere. We ain't leaving. But as long as I'm breathing, my fist up and screaming. Power to the workers. Power to the workers. Can y'all join me? Can y'all join me singing? Power to the workers. We can do it. Power to the working class. Hey. They sang. Workers got together, shot the city down. They marched on the red. Y'all feeling everybody having a good time? As they marched, the workers sang out. Just trying to read a little bit of the arts, a little bit of hip hop to y'all real quick. Like I said, it's Bay Area. And
Bringing summer,
this is right here. My father was actually born in Campomache, 1944. I'm Japanese from Colombia.
You know.
I had my lifetime teacher that got everything taken from me. Check it. School teachers used to treat art history like trivia. My home is where I'm at. Diary in Bolivia State, where I'm welcome and greeted with open arms. As long as every action is for the cause, to know where my enemy sleeps, and to decode the message in invisible needs. And they try with the KKK and all the Nazis. My father was born in Campomache, took my fam property, declared war on the Japanese. To get rid of my family was a strategy. So I'm here just to settle the score. It's for my bartender, trying to weather the storm, never bring in. And many had to wade in the water, off trail with any way to escape all the drama they had made. And then that it was like a death form. This land that was stolen, the blood is still pouring. That's why we scream justice is past due. Starting with tearing down these monuments and statues. To praise Christopher Columbus is ridiculous. That disrespected the blood of the indigenous ones here before us. Tradition is original. We know America's history's all typical. Long line colonizers, rapers, and slave owners. All the traitors, the snitches, and the scapegoaters. Naysayers, they stubborn, acting adamant. Too pessimistic, it's come and go. Activist we keep it natural. We all will always try and smoke weed in front of 850 Ryan. And I ain't lying, I'm a Frisco legend, this man, my brother himself, Mr. Michael Marshall. Can y'all give him a warm welcome? Just a brief summary of the original voice to look at all these rumors. The original voice to I got 500. He's a Bay Area legend from Berkeley. He happens to be my bro. And that's 15, 17 years. And we got a song called Tonight We Ride. He came with this concept of ride to document what's going on with police brutality. And I know it doesn't change a lot, but we need to expose these officers and how these laws are going down.
Tonight we gon' ride for Tony.
This is called Tonight We Ride, dedicated for those that lost their lives at the hands of the police.
Tonight we ride for Alex Neto and Oscar. Tonight we gon' ride for Oscar Philando Castillo. Yeah, we gon' ride for the ones who might die tonight at the hands of the police.
Oh my God, please don't tell me this thing.
Man, I'm dead. 10 minutes ago, on the streets of Frisco, I was murdered. Yeah, they shot me in my back and left me undercover. And as I paid out, all they did was call it in. Someone yell freedom, I guess I moved. Cause the next thing that I felt was never through. Just turned me around and now years of police with their faces glaring, voices screaming, don't move. I got so confused. What did I do? Samir Rice and Alex Neto. Tonight we ride for Walter Scott and Mario Wood. Tonight we ride for Sandra Bland, Freddie Gray and Eric Garner. Yeah, we gon' ride for the ones who might die tonight at the hands of the police.
His hands up.
Don't shoot.
Take it to court, the jury says no proof. We ain't waiting for the verdict, it's like we already heard it. So tonight we ride for all of those that got murdered amongst us. D-boys, P's, and the hustlers coming together to seek justice for sisters and brothers no longer here, no proper burial. So we taking it upon ourselves for ritual, ceremonial dancing of the ancestors, saging the gravesite, healing with the family, but knowing that it takes time. Building harmony within the solidarity, apply code and ethics and more with transparency. We want a revolution, and moment turn the movement, supported by the OGs, but led by the students. Shit, it's enough, we gon' put aside our differences, so when the time comes, we uprise and finish this tonight.
We ride for Camille Rice,
Well,
and Alex Neto. Tonight we ride for Walter Scott and Mario Wood. Tonight we ride for Sandra Bland, Freddie Gray and Eric Garner. Yeah, we gon' ride for the ones who might die tonight at the hands of the police. Shake his hand was the last thing that I heard before I passed over. But my last thoughts went out to my sister and my brother. Cause it's them that's gonna have to tell my mother. I heard the preach, but I didn't move to raise my hand. Don't shoot, I was confused, but on. So why did these assholes shoot me before I go and take this final sleep? Could someone please tell me why you're so scared? Why you're so scared? The police. Freddie Gray and Eric Garner. Yeah, we gon' ride for the ones who might die tonight at the hands of the police. Why you so scared of me? Why you so scared of me? Why you so scared of me? Don't shoot my head up. Why you so scared of me?
police brutality, we just fight for police accountability. My hat says jail killer cops. We all know that's not the answer. We know a new mayor is not the answer, but we know a new chief of police is not the answer necessarily, but we try to take steps towards, bettering our community or whatnot, making sure that these cops can't just walk around in our neighborhoods without walking on eggshells, without knowing that we're going to be there, not knowing that we're going to be aware. And I want to say a few things that sparked from the hunger strike or whatever it was that happened. There's 154 weeks now, Mothers on the March has been on the steps of 850 Bryant, which is the Hall of Justice in San Francisco, and the mothers of the community have been there for over 154 weeks, every Friday from 12 p.m. to 2 p.m., and that started, basically, is for police accountability. It's targeting the District Attorney, George Gaston, who hasn't charged nobody for nothing when it comes to the police. When it comes to a slap on the wrist, or it comes to someone drinking in public, or burning a flag, or exercising their First Amendment or whatnot, he's prosecuted people. You know what I mean? He's actually put a restraining order on some of my comrades. But so this is the type of things that we're dealing with. Also, Frisco Cop Watch is something that came out of the hunger strike and through community involvement. And for Cop Watches, it's nothing brand new, but in San Francisco, it was a time when no one was really hitting the streets and no one was getting together and really, building and talking and holding these officers accountable as far as exposing them, letting people know their record, their name, where they're from. They're not even from the city, but they terrorize the same community that they're in. And I think it's very important. It's like 30 members are involved and they hit the streets every night and, just trying to hold police accountable. And I know there's a heavy, just like it's important that we bring to light what's happening to the Latino community, right? Because it always gets swept under the rug as well, like when we talk about Alex Nieto, Emilcar Perez, Luis Gonga, and Pat in San Francisco, which all happening within like a 2-year range, a year and a half. And I'm aware as far as what's happening out here too. The beautiful woman was relaying to me about how people are uprising because one after another, every 2 weeks, another 2 weeks, another person gets killed or murdered by the police officers, and nothing is really being done about it. So we're gonna do one more song. It's gonna be a solo song by Mr. Michael Marshall, and it's called San Francisco, but it's coming from a movie that's actually out in theaters right now. It's called The Last Black Man in San Francisco, and it's called Last Black Man in San Francisco, directed by Jim Talbot. He's a young kid that I actually know from San Francisco, and it's written by Jimmy Fails as well, another kid that I know. There's real San Francisco people actually in the movie, rapper Stan Quinn, Danny Glover's in it. There's a lot of dope artists, Mike Epps is in it. And I encourage y'all to see the movie, because it's a reflection of not just what's going on in San Francisco. Yeah, it's called that, but it's gentrification, it's displacement, it's what's going on everywhere, all over. And San Francisco might be the root of that problem, a lot of it, right? Because we're moving out. We moved out here. We moved to Antioch. We moved to Pittsburgh. And we've overflooded a lot of these communities due to the tech boom. And, so this song is called San Francisco. I hope y'all enjoy it. Mr. Michael Morris.
Be sure to wear
sorprende. Thank you.
Please give it up to Mr. Michael Marshall and my DJ Q Justice. They're up here putting it down for y'all. Thank you for all. Thank you for all, y'all.
Once again, let's hear it for Equipto. It's important to say that all the performers today volunteered their time. So, you know, it's part of their love coming out to our community to support this event. I'm going to kind of go fast now because we're already getting to almost the last hour. We're going to bring up a speaker right now. Is Blanca here? Blanca, okay. So, then we're going to hear from Noe Yao Montoya. Oh, are you ready to go right now? Okay, let's do a little change to that. Let's do Noe Yao Montoya, who earlier on gave the blessing. He's going to share some music with us. Thank you.
Give me a couple of minutes here, set up. Another round of applause for everybody who's been here today. I'd like to ask a big favor. I believe in unity, so if anybody could just get up and come closer. Por favor. Too far apart. No tengan miedo. So, my name is Noe Yaupoat Montoya, and it's an honor for me to be here today, sharing songs that I've been performing since 1970, when I first joined the Teatro Campesino and became involved with the Chicano movement. So I was thinking, what can I do for the presentation today? So I just made a list of songs. We came here to listen to music, not to me speak. So this first song is dedicated to migrants, because if it wasn't for the migrants that work out in the fields, this country would go hungry, because who would pick the vegetables? But this song was inspired by Woody Guthrie, when he heard about a plane crash that was carrying some Mexican migrants to being deported, and he wrote this song called Deportee. The crops are all in, and the peaches are rotting. The oranges are piled in their creosote dumps. They're flying them back to the Mexican border to spend all their money to way back again. My father's own father, he waded that river. They took all the money he had in his life. My brothers and sisters, they work under fruit trees, and they rode on your trucks till they took up and died. And goodbye to my Juan, goodbye Rosalita. Adiós mis amigos, Jesús y María. You won't have your name when you ride that big airplane, and all they will call you will be deportee. Some of us are illegal, some are not wanted. Our work contracts up and we have to move on. 600 miles to the Mexican border. They chase us like outlaws, like rustlers, like thieves. We died in your hills, we died in your valleys. We died in your deserts, we died on your plains.
We die beneath your trees, we die in your bushes. Both sides of the border, we die just the same. Goodbye to my Juan, goodbye Rosalita. Adiós mis amigos, Jesús y María. You won't have your name when you ride that big airplane. And all they will call you will be deportee. The sky plane caught fire over Los Gatos Canyon. Like a fireball of lightning that shook all the hills. Who are all these friends that are scattered like dry leaves? Well, the radio said they were just deportees. Is this the best way we can grow our good orchard? Is this the best way we can grow our good fruit? To be scattered like dry leaves, to rot on your topsoil, and be called by no name except deportee. Adiós a mi Juan, adiós Rosalita. Adiós mis amigos, Jesús y María. You won't have your name when you ride that big airplane. And all they will call you will be deportee. Yes, all they will call you will be deportee. As the son of migrant parents, this next song is very, very real for me, as I'm sure it is to a lot of people in this community. Having grown up as a child, watching my family, including my sister right here, sitting here, my sister, they were migrant children. I was too young to work in the fields, but I remember having traveled, constantly following the crops. So this next song is dedicated to los niños campesinos, that goes like this. Como a la 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 de la mañana, el sol calienta ranchos anchos y de los todos los baña. De esos campos van los niños campesinos, sin un destino, son peregrinos de verdad. Van de camino los veranos, inviernos y primaveras, cruzando estados y condados y ciudades extranjeras, como las golondrinas van bajo los cielos, dándose vuelo de sus anhelos de verdad. Van a los files de la uva, betabel y de manzana, y ahí los niños se la pasan todo el día entre las ramas, de sol a sol hasta que llega el paradores, dándoles flores para dolores de verdad. Pero algún día estos niños serán hombres y mujeres, trabajadores campesinos que defienden sus quereres, y mano en mano tomando otro camino. Vivan los niños, vivan familias de perdón. Sí, señor. I remember during the Chicano movement, it inspired me as a young Chicano struggling for an identity. But the movement became universal because it was not only, we weren't only fighting for justice here in this country, but all over Latin America. A good friend of mine, Daniel Valdez, from El Teatro Campesino, wrote this song called La Libertad. viento lejano se oye el llanto de los pueblos, pueblos oprimidos que buscan libertad. Libertad encarcelada por un gobierno codicioso que solo con la muerte sus puertas abren. Y porque viví para sufrir, los pueblos de América en su duelo hallarán que la lucha por justicia es universal. Y el grito de esperanza se oye por toda la noche, despertando al mundo pobre que tan dormido está. Y desde ese momento lucharemos el camino, peleando y muriendo por la libertad. Y porque viví para sufrir, jamás habrá llantos de la desesperación. Uniremos todo el mundo en la revolución. Y cuando al fin que hay prosperidad, habrá gritos de victoria a través todo el mar. Pero nunca olvidaremos las penas de sufrir por la libertad, que es la vida, y sin ella no se puede vivir. La libertad. Wow. Again, this next song is also for the children and for the parents that struggle to make their children's lives much better. Such was the case when the United Farm Workers went out on strike in 1965 in Delano, because the campesinos had little to begin with, and they had to go out on strike. But that was the only way that they could provide a better world for their children, the brown-eyed children of the sun. Up to California, from Mexico you come to the Sacramento Valley to toil in the sun. Your wife and 7 children, they're working everyone. And what will you be giving to your brown-eyed children of the sun? Your face is lined and wrinkled, your age is 41, your back is faint from picking, and your dying times have come. But your children's eyes are smiling, for their lives have just begun. And what will you be giving to your brown-eyed children of the sun? Well, you marched on Easter Sunday, and to the Capitol you come. You
You fight for union wages, and your fight has just begun. Well, you're a proud man, and you're a free man, and this heritage is one that you can be giving to your brown-eyed children of the sun. In Latin America, there's always been corrupt governments, and a lot of it with the help of the United States, unfortunately. But there have been warriors that have been sacrificed their lives to fight for justice. One such warrior, of course, was an Argentino by the name of Ernesto Guevara, Che. This song was written by Victor Jara. Se llama La Samba de Che. Vengo a cantar esta samba con cordables libertarios. Mataron al guerrillero Che, comandante Guevara. Selvas, pampas y montañas, patria, muerte es su destino. Selvas, pampas y montañas, patria, muerte es su destino. Que los derechos humanos los violan en tantas partes, en América Latina, domingo, lunes y martes, nos imponen militares para sonrizar el pueblo, dictadores, asesinos, gorilas y criminales. Explotan al campesino, al minero y al obrero, cuánto dolor su destino, hambre, miseria y dolor. Bolívar le dio el camino y Guevara lo siguió. Liberar a nuestro pueblo del dominio explotador. A Cuba le doy la gloria de la nación liberada. Bolivia también le llora su vida sacrificada. San Ernesto de la Higuera le llaman los campesinos. Selvas, pampas y montañas, patria o muerte es su destino. Selvas, pampas y montañas, patria o muerte es su destino. Para Che Guevara. So, running out of time, so I'm going to end with a medley that I put together. And you guys can hum along, clap along, throw gritos, anything you want. It's a little medley that I hope you enjoy. Make sure I'm in the right key. And it goes like this. There we go. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Islands, from the redwood forest to the dusty waters. This land was meant for you and me. As I went walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that in the skyway, I saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Islands, from the redwood forest to the dusty water. This land was made for you and me. I roamed and roamed it. I'm sorry. I roamed it. I roamed and rambled through the sparkly sand, her tiny sands, her diamond deserts, and all around me a voice was chanting, yeah, this land was meant for you and me.
this land is your land, this land is my land. From California to the New York Islands, from the redwood forest to the gusting waters, this land was made for you and me. Freedom and justice is the melody that let us shine on. And if you feel it in the music, we can make this world a better place. I said freedom and justice is the melody that let us shine on. Well, if you feel it in the music, we can make this world a better place. Live together, love forever. Well, it's the only thing that we can do. Well, take my hand and by me stand. I know we're going to make it through. 'Cause freedom and justice is the melody that let us shine on. And if you feel it in the music, we can make this world a better place. This land is your land, this land is mine. From California to the New York Islands, to the redwood forest, to something there. Yeah, this land was made for you and me. As I was researching this song, I came across a really got three verses I had never heard before, and I learned it the other day. I hope I don't blow it, because it's very apropos. It says, there was a big high wall there that tried to stop me, and on that wall there said no trespassing, but on the other side it said nothing at all. 'Cause this land was meant for you and me. This land is your land, this land is my land. From California to the New York Islands, from the redwood forest to the gusting water. Well, this land was made for you and me. And this is my mantra. Nobody living can never stop me as I go walking down Freedom's highway. Nobody living can never make me turn back. 'Cause this land was meant for you and me. I said that this land was meant for you and me. De colores se visten los campos en la primavera. De colores son los pajarillos que vienen de afuera. De colores es el arco iris que vemos lucir. Y por eso los grandes amores de muchos colores me gustan a mí. Y por eso los grandes amores de muchos colores me gustan a mí. Canta el gallo con el kikiriki, kikiriki. La gallina con el cara. Los polluelos con el pío. Y por eso los grandes amores de muchos colores me gustan a mí. Y por eso los grandes amores de muchos colores me gustan a mí. ¡Que viva la gente del mundo, por favor!
One more time. Took me back to the Chicano movement, UFW workers. Yeah, thank you so much. All right, we got We just got some really great music here today. And also we have, for this last hour, we have a speaker, 2 poets, and we're going to end with some música by Steven Sands. But I'd like to bring up Blanca Zarazua. She is the attorney, and she's an attorney and also an honorary consul of Mexico. She's a recipient of the Ralph Atkinson Civil Rights Liberties Award for her immigrant advocacy, and she's a member of the American Immigration Lawyers Association and the Monterey County Immigration Coalition. Please welcome Blanca Zarazua.
Thank you. Good afternoon, buenas tardes. I want to show you a photo to start off my comments. It's very dear to me. I don't have my own children. I'm not married. I'm just kind of lost soul. But I'm a very proud child. And this is a picture of my father and my grandfather. Please don't ask me which one is which, because I've lost all faith in anybody having common sense. So it's a great picture taken about 1930. About 1930 in Querétaro, Mexico. My father was probably about 12 years old. And once you see this picture, you'll understand when I say I'm processed goods. These are the raw materials. My immigrant story began as follows. In 1945, my father came to this country from Mexico's Brasil, to Chular, that budding, bustling metropolis south of Salinas. And he worked at a labor camp. He had no English language skills, very little money, and was undocumented. He arrived from a small town in Guanajuato, Mexico, and became very good friends with the cook at the labor camp, who was from a different state. My father was from Guanajuato, this other gentleman was from Jalisco. He became buddies with the cook at the labor camp, and long story short, he ended up marrying the cook's daughter, my mother. They were together for 55 years, which sounds like 1,000 years these days. With relationships are so frivolous and superficial, and between me we have children. My father worked with Leon Panetta's father, and so did my mother. My mother picked walnuts with Carmelo. And it's a fabulous story about how America used to be. It used to be that if you just worked really hard, you could get tremendous opportunities. And so we lived in the little red homes that are still there on the old Odella Ranch in Carmelo. My dad worked on the artichoke ranch. Carmelo was the foreman. And at that time, the mayor of Monterey, obviously I'm off script, but I've said this a million times, it's all factual, you can fact check me. The mayor of Monterey contacted Carmelo and said, we have a wealthy family coming into Carmel Valley, do you have someone you could recommend? And he recommended my father, Aquilino Sarasua, and we upgraded to a private estate in Carmel Valley that used to be owned by Hank Ketchum, Dennis Salinas guy. And we lived in the servants' quarters, and my parents worked for the people in the big house, and my mother was the maid there, my dad was the gardener. It was utopia. It was totally organic. McDonald's once a year was like, wow, in Salinas. And we would spend our weekdays and Saturdays on the peninsula, and then on Sundays we'd go ding, 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 to Salinas, to Spanish Mass, get our tortillas, and see some Mexicanos, just to kind of keep us in check. And then we'd go back to Gringolandia, as I call it. A very, very welcoming community. I did not grow up thinking there was racism anywhere in the world, because everyone treated us very nicely, and I'm not making that. And so when I went to college in LA, people say, oh, you have white friends? I said, yeah, they're really nice. They're really nice. So don't shut yourself out and start classifying people into boxes. There are different people everywhere in the world. Anyway, let me finish off this story because it is kind of a touching story. So we lived in that ranch, and then the owners moved to Santa Barbara, and we had to leave because the home was never ours. And we were devastated, you know. It was Tubercitos, public school, Carmel Middle, all the way up. And we had to move, and then my dad started the first gardening business on the peninsula over 50 years ago. He was in Carmel Valley before there was a paved Carmel Valley. Just to kind of give you a sense. He worked on the Fish Ranch, he worked on the Russell Ranch, which is now Stone Pine. He worked at Rancho San Carlos, which is now the Preserve, and all of that. Yeah. And before there were golf courses, it was a lot of kids. And the new owner told my father, I'm going to have to demolish the house. He started subdividing the ranch. And my father said, please don't, I raised my daughters there, 3 of us. And he sold him the house. And I live in that house with my mother. My father died in that house. It dates back to 1893. And it's just a tremendous source of self-confidence to look up at the ceiling in the morning and know it's the same one when you were 5 years in it. I took care of my father for 16 years in that house. I'll tell you about that in a bit, but I left San Francisco and came to take care of him just like, you know, traditional Mexicans do. And now I'm taking care of my mother, and I'm going on 10 years. And like I say, thank God we only have 2 parents. It's exhausting, but very satisfying. My mother eventually became a domestic worker, and I used to clean homes with her, mansions and Pebble Beach and everything. And we were never impressed as children by wealth. We grew up around it. We weren't part of that, but we commingled in it. But we weren't the kids who were frustrated because we didn't have the $200 tennis shoes. We were not raised to be materialistic. It was so much more than that. It was about integrity. It was about making a footprint in the community. It was about things that were much more enduring than money. So my father was deported several times. And back then, you know, to interview as a bracero, they would look at your hands. You know, as I say, crunchy hands. I love crunchy hands. Soft ones, I'm not so much on guys. But they wanted to check to see if he had worked, if he did have a history. This is kind of a resume. And then whenever they got caught and they would deport them, they would shave their hair. But my father was so hairy, like in 24 hours, he was back to normal. We had difficult times, but we never gave up. I was a very grateful child, and I'm a grateful adult. But I'm always editing life. I'm always looking to do things better, make things better. I'm happy, I'm fine, everything. Now how can we make it better? And we had no economic privilege, but we had a better kind of privilege, which was being raised by caring parents who taught my 2 sisters and I how to work, how to think, and how to live. I went on to do my schooling. I have 3 graduate degrees. Way too much education, but I'm definitely processed goods. This is where it all started. And I had such a open-minded, not macho dad. He was like a spiritual soul. My mother and I tried to figure out where he got this pro-women attitude. Like, where did he get this stuff? It's not from the guys he hangs out with, because we've already given him the macho test, and they passed with flying colors. So I did my schooling, and then I went on and worked at the California Supreme Court, and I also worked as a tax specialist, certified tax specialist, as a lawyer at Bank of America in San Francisco. And I set up my own practice. The economy tanked, and I thought after 20 years of tax, I've got to do something else. And it took a lot of courage. I wasn't 20 then, I'm not 20 now, and I switched specialties to immigration. I'm very grateful for that decision, which took a lot of guts, by the way. You know, you just kind of say 20 years of this very technical information, next. Just erase the cassette and start over. So as I said, I was a very grateful child, but now I'm a grateful adult. Why? Because we're in a country where we have the U.S. Constitution. I'm so grateful to be in this country. If you travel a bit and do your little comparison shopping, you'll see that the U.S. Constitution still is a document that guides this country and serves as a benchmark for other countries. I've served as Honorary Consul of Mexico for 15 years now, over 15 years. In this role, I've met the most beautiful immigrants and their families, but I've also seen the forces of injustice in this country. You want to see injustice, go to immigration court in Arizona. The U.S. Constitution isn't even parenthetical. I mean, I had to remind the judge, I think he's innocent until proven guilty, but I might be wrong. Maybe not in Arizona. I've seen how fear is used to modify behavior. Fear can be used as a tool to discourage people in this country from exercising their legal rights. Many today have as their primary goal, personal, political, whatever, instilling fear in others. I say everyone facing fear is not an option. That's what I say. My other favorite saying is, call me when you recover. Because I have so much stupidity in my life every day from all sides. But I'm a very critical thinker, and I don't let it in. I listen to it and I discard it. I've reaped the benefits of persistence. I've seen the power of knowledge, and I live the freedom of education. Formal education is freedom. I don't have to work at McDonald's if I want, but I can. During these difficult times, I believe we all have a duty to defend, a duty to vote, and a duty to highlight human rights violations so that they may be corrected. My work is based on defending the Constitution, one family at a time. If we help just one person, we are most likely helping an entire family. I invite you to continue being vigilant, continue being strong, and continue defending the U.S. Constitution. This single document and the values it protects and embodies distinguishes us from all other countries in the world. Before I conclude, I'd like to speak a different language, and no, it's not Spanish. Please remember that Japanese is not my first language, and please excuse my horrific accent. Watashi ta chiwa mina imi takara otagari tas kyaiman masho. What I meant to say there, if there's anyone here who speaks Italian, I'm sorry. We are all immigrants and we must stand together. Thank you.
Once again, un aplauso for Blanca. Dear friend, what's his name? My dear friend, a poet who comes out of the Watsonville area, born and raised. Yeah, let's hear it for Watsonville. And he's now living in Oakland, which is where I've met Ricardo Tavares. Once again, within our area of poetry, we have connected. He is the curator of several series, including the Pan Dulce Poets. His work appears online in journals and most recently in print anthology called Poetry in Flight. Please welcome Ricardo Tavares.
From Watsonville, I grew up in Watsonville. And kind of like in the neighboring towns, Castle, Salinas, Mas Landing, Las Lomas, Freedom, so there's been like a historical vibe going on, so I'm going to pull a poem that has to do with the Watsonville cannery workers' strike. My mother, she was part of the strike. It's titled Frozen Food Capital. In adolescent memories, steam billows from distant cannery stacks. The corrugated mustard shell was an intrusion in vast fields. Memories of steamed vegetable wisps that clung to my mother's white plastic apron remind me of the years she toiled to raise her children and her fight for a future. In 1985, picket line snipers hurl volcanic rocks through scabbed windshields. National news networks flash our struggle into America's living rooms. 1,500 workers unite. Union boss Fred Heim underestimated the will of the workers tired of empty promises and deals undercutting worker wages. Life paused for 19 months. Sergio Lopez, the Teamster puppet prince, stringing us along with My Hands Are Tied. School friends disappeared from class. Moved? Evicted. $50 weekly benefits, not enough to pay the bills. Next up, us. Boxes packed, loaded car, muffler exhaling cancer. Where to go? At lunch, we delivered lunch plates that my mother ate in the crisscross shadow of a cyclone fence. Origami tortilla folds as she listened to shouts in the distance. Fiery clashes peaked when Teamsters in the owner's pocket ended the strike. The emboldened few walked back with dignity, having defeated the ominous Richard Shaw. Only half of the original workers returned to the conveyor lines for less than they negotiated. After the anger and struggle, a worker gleamed into America's living rooms to declare, "We are not afraid." Thank you. This poem was inspired by a poem by Roque Dalton, a Salvadoran poet. This poem is a poema de amor para los guanacos, but this is titled Undocumented. The ones who pick fruit, vegetables, carve slaughterhouse flesh, scrub floors and restaurant dishes, trim garden plants, harvest orchards and vineyards, cook and labor 12 hours a day, care for someone's children, push fabric and food into the whir of machines. The ones who endure the cancer's gaze as they step out of their neighborhoods. The ones who survive hidden in gated Jasper mansions. The ones whose homelands have been occupied by transnational trade agreements. The ones forgotten as unions and politicians yarn about a living wage. The ones who fight for shade and water in the fuming sun while bosses lounge on dollar bill Adirondacks. The ones whose children face the blade of cutbacks first while our economy dances on stilts made of their skin and bone. The ones who disappear in the border prison profit system, deemed invisible by law, forsaken by their home governments in border gulags. The ones who shimmer golden, harvesting crops to feed America like a compassionate Christ on the mount, feeding multitudes with inexhaustible baskets. The ones who build civilizations with corn and blood. My sisters and brothers, my aunts and uncles, my neighbors, my friends, my family, my people. Or I'll do one more. Thanks for coming out. Thanks for inviting me. Thank you, Japanese American Citizens League, for this the show of solidarity. Convenient Illusions, Part 1. Brittle turquoise and painted feathers encrust empty hearts, searching for an aesthetic among tired Rockwellian prairies. Neon headdresses reconfigured, caricatured into powder blue skinned movie aliens, pre-Columbian bloodletting anachronisms, lost in plastic shamanism, brewing caustic capitalist ayahuasca. A hemisphere whirls in a fog of illusion, consecrated manifesto. A metamorphosis of empty trees and miseducation, unrecognized by Marion Morrison fabrications. As weathered bodies stand faceless, some in government lines, some in border checkpoints, reaching out for a smile, reaching out for hope. Forget celluloid warriors who weep with morning glories in their hair, drumming minds into euphoric cotton candy visions. Reject myths that sedate our hearts to the alien spirit who stomps on asphalt far from ancestral lands and Mount La Bestia toward uncertainty. Refuse myths that sedate our hearts to save a soul of a hemisphere that forgot us long ago. Thank you.
Beautiful poetry. Thank you. We have another poet, Lady Medina, who we also had the pleasure of hearing when she makes her rounds to the Bay Area. She is a poet and spoken word artist. She represented at the Loudmouth Poetry Slam at the Women of the World Poetry Slam in Visalia. And she received the 2017 Fresno Arts Council Horizon Award. She also mentors high school students in Fresno County. So do you live in the Fresno area?
Yes,
All right, but you're from Salinas, right on, okay. So please welcome Irene.
To howl. A howl is much more than a prayer or a word or a cleverly put together song. It is past poem, it is past speech, it is past anything I could ever put together with syllables. To howl, that is the beginning of the first. I am here, I am standing, I am in pain, and I will fight. We who are women who have given birth, who have lost mothers, who have lost fathers, who have lost limbs and wombs and things that are tender to us, we know the feeling and the depthness of the howl. It is much more than I could ever say. It is my heart reaching out to your heart. It is my consciousness reaching out to your consciousness. Can we understand each other without ever saying a single word? If language is a barrier, if it is something that makes you fearful, then I lose all my language. But listen, this is my howl. And my heart is in pain. And I turn towards the border. And I remember the border inside of me. The many times I was told I did not belong. And I knew they were wrong. But my mind did not know how to translate that into anything else but pain. This is the beginning of my howl. Can you understand? My poems are never anything from the intellectual. I heard the poet speak how we had a historical vibe. When as poets, every poem that we write is a part of our history, if it is truthful, if it comes from us. Where are your safe places, America? Where are the places my parents dreamed about for me? Miguel and Lupe Medina, where are those places? The places I was told all I had to do was work hard for. Where are the places you promised my brothers and sisters, my son, my daughter, who put on uniforms and died in your honor? Where are those places? Where are your safe places to shelter their memories and praise their names? Where are your safe places, America? Where are these places of me? Where are your safe places for our futures? Where are your safe places for our grandmothers and grandfathers? Where are the places for the elders who broke their backs with endless toil in your lush coastal fields and those dry, hot valley summers? Where will they rest their bones? Where will they find a thank you for all the wealth that they've created for the American farmers, for all the food that fed a nation and the world? Where are your safe places, America? For the people who silenced their own language for your acceptance, discúlpame, killing their own spirits, because who could stand up as a 5-year-old tell me, to an adult backhand to the mouth for speaking Spanish, shut up, wet back, second grade, Mrs. Ashton, Sanborn Elementary, Salinas, California? Where are your safe places for those 5-year-olds? Where are your safe places for my memories? Tell me, where are your safe places, America? When my smile is greeted with distrust or disgust, ask where I am from. Where are your safe places for my children, future grandchildren? I will not lie to them. I don't paint pretty pictures. I have told them they will have to work twice as hard as anyone else, and they may learn all of the words in all of your books and memorize all of the numbers, add them up and divide them in school, and they may fly through the halls of great universities with great honors and many degrees and still be denied a safe place from your hate. I dress them and I tell them, stand in fortitude and arm yourself with some dignity. I tell them, you will have to create your own safe places. You will have to fight for those places. You will have to stand and protect others behind you for those places. But no, it was not given to you. And it is not openly handed over without a fight. My dear America, you have forgotten, or maybe even tried to deny your beginnings, the truly desperate immigrants who came to conquer, who murdered, raped, and stole from our nations. You have forgotten, America, but you need to remember. You need to remember. So we may face the truth of ourselves together and build those safe places. Those safe places where greatness is truly found, true greatness. Those places that I'm sorry we have yet to discover. I'm carefully watching to see for when I get pulled off the stage. A small mind and small spirits. If you do not hear the bombs, they are not falling. If you do not hear the cries, they are not crying. And we can turn away because they are not Christians, they are not Americans, they are not white, they are not property owners. Now we can hoard our internet prayers, our concerned tweets, our Instagram visuals, save them for a better cause. No use wasting good thoughts and positive vibes. It's all propaganda. You let your demigods tell you it's propaganda, the same way neo-Nazis claim the Holocaust was propaganda, and the Japanese really went to a summer camp, and everyone knows that that was not an internment camp or a concentration camp. And that word is not truly a concentration camp. Is it not just the detention center? The twists and the turns in logic are acrobatic and amazing feats. Now that you believe you can save yourself by letting the world die, the topography of the brain must look like scar tissue. The world is small. It is not big enough for anyone who is not white or rich. Either one of those categories can make you feel as though you deserve to be right. But only one of those categories really matters. Please think about it. Just ask the bank. Ask the bank. God bless the bank and the righteous dollar, for God would never abandon his deserving people, and a dollar in the bank is the true mark of a good man. It is not big enough to include brothers or sisters in Syria. It is not big enough to find the other side of Palestine or any country south of Mexico. Just ask the Mexican government how easy it is to forget who is human and who is not a valuable commodity. Please, please, small minds, bellies tremble at the word of refugee. Not one more, he whispered quietly. Not today, not today. My cup is so full. And these teacup existences are easily filled. One more drop of sorrow, and you will spill over in a fit of hate. or how I managed to get through the day without going into a screaming fit. Because I'm hurting so much all the time, it seems. And you have to go on with the business of everyday life, right? Go to work, pay your bills, take care of your family, all these things. I think that in these times, banding together this way, having this place open to us by the citizens who come here and gather for social events, to show solidarity with us, to see all of you good people sitting here, knowing that we are fighting, knowing that we're not ready to just lay down and give up. That is my saving grace. To see strength in others. Not in my own, because my own is a struggle every day to get up and fight. Cactus flowers. From cactus fruit, from desert, from nothing. Petals open for all living things like pools, mothers of the desert, beautiful to serve life. Nopalitos, green fathers, broken open, give up water, give up flesh, a communion. To serve life is beautiful, it is strength. It is a crime to leave water in the desert for travelers. And the cactus stands up and the cactus says, I do not give a fuck if I will be charged or prosecuted. And the thorns are beautiful daggers. And the people march into the desert with gallons of water and truth. And the truth is prickly and crowned with flowers. We embrace the truth. Thorns piercing, we stand in resistance with the cactus, and the sunrise over the desert is glorious, and my spirit rises with the light. And the first revolution must happen inside of you. It comes from a struggle. It comes from the end of a fight where there is no place left to go, when you are your only hope because no one is coming to your rescue. Revolution takes hold of you when you are the last line of defense between your children and destruction. When you are left without a choice, you will fight. With joy in your heart, you will fight. And revolution will remind you you are still alive and no amount of adversity can keep you from the intention to survive and overcome. And every morning, you will commit to the revolution. Every morning you will commit to the revolution. Every morning you will commit to this revolution. And on the mornings when you wake up in the arms of complacency with no desire to stand up for yourself, you need to remember, revolution is born from a great love of life, not from hate. This thought is revolution.
Poetry from the heart and soul. Thank you so much, Adi Medina. One more time. Right now, Stephen Sands, who's going to play some music, and also Margaret Bonetti. Where did she go? There we go. So while Stephen is kind of setting up, I would like Margaret to take a few minutes to talk a little bit about what's going on with the Salinas area. Margaret is an activist in the Monterey County area, and she is also president of Monterey. Monterey.
Hola. Great. I'm no poet, and I am no musician. I am an activist, and I have to say again, one more round of applause for all the poets, musicians, and share their talent, because it is so nice to have a talent like that. One I do not have. Activism chose me. I'd like to start out by saying thank you on behalf of the UFW Foundation. The proceeds today, one of those recipients is the UFW Foundation, and they wanted you to know just a little bit about who they are and what they do. They're a sister to the UFW, and so the funds that they gather are used for immigration rights, education, DACA. They partner up with Hartnell, Gavilan College, MDC, and some of the other educational outlets. And they help families with housing. Right now, they're very involved in what's going on at the border and making sure that people know their rights. For example, most people don't know that if an ICE agent comes to your door or knocks on your car door or any of those things and says to you they have a warrant that you do not have to honor, or that person does not have to honor that warrant because it's not signed by a judge. And most people don't know that, so they use fear and intimidation in order to harvest these people in and detain them. So anyway, about that. So I'm fortunate to have been raised the daughter of a bracero. And both my parents were immigrants. Guadalupe and Julia Serna, who came here from Mexico, they came here. My father came here as a bracero, and then they traveled different states before settling in Gonzales and then ultimately in San Juan Bautista. My father was involved with Cesar Chavez when I was a very young girl. And so it's just part of my makeup. And as I like to say, some people are born with a silver spoon, and I was born with a picket sign in my mouth at birth. And so I was raised up in that. I can tell you learn quite a bit when you're sitting in the back seat of a vehicle listening to adults discuss human and civil rights, and so that's my upbringing. And so whenever I hear about injustices, it's this that empowers me to go out and to be involved in my community, because as I will say to anybody, you don't need anybody's permission to be out there and to be active. You don't have to be invited by an organization or told that, oh no, sit back because other people are going to tell you how to do it. That's how we are defeated. When we don't listen to our own inner voices, and when we don't get out there and just lead on our own without waiting to be asked. A couple of years back, so I've served as a school board member in Salinas. I got involved in the school district because I wanted to make a difference in my children's lives. My parents were never able to make that kind of a difference because they weren't welcome at the school. My migrant parents were not the stereotype of, they were not the family knows best image. And so they were never really welcome at the school. And when I had my children, I decided that I wanted to give back in a way that they never could. But again, I found those same stereotypes. And so it's this stuff that has kept me involved. While on the school board, I saw so many injustices within the community, that whole school to prison pipeline that exists, the lack of ethnic studies in the school districts, and police officers on school grounds, which really caught my attention, the militarization of inviting military on the school campuses and having them there on a daily basis, but not on all school campuses, mainly on the school campuses of color. And so I partnered up with other people who were interested in the same things that I were in order to get the military off of our campuses without permission from the parents, in order to, in order to get police officers off the campuses. A couple of years back, in 2014, we had 4 officer-involved shootings in Salinas. And at about the second one, I was really unhappy and infuriated and moved to action. And so I partnered up with attorney John Burris, who was a civil rights attorney out of Oakland, because by then there was a 3rd shooting and then a 4th shooting. And working with John Burris, we were able to bring the Department of Justice into the police department in Salinas in order to take a look at all the records that were there, because what we were getting was a lot of pushback. I was getting a lot of pushback. You're playing the race card. And so when somebody tells you you're playing the race card, what you're supposed to do is say, oh, no, not me, no, you're right, no. Well, that's not me. So when somebody told me I was playing the race card, I said, I do believe there are stereotypes. And I do believe it's built in. But quite honestly, all of us will know the truth when you take a look at the records in the police department, and you'll find out, we'll all find out whether or not there was a race card involved here, because I don't shy away from those things. Department of Justice ultimately came in to Salinas, and they took a look at the records. And they found 110 findings of areas areas of fault and 61 recommendations for improvement. Well, I can tell you the Salinas Police Department was not happy with it and had a lot of pushback. They were brought in to work with the department because there was no trust, to work between the department and the community for 2 years and review them. Then Donald Trump was elected into office, and when Donald Trump was elected into office, we all knew what was going to happen, and sure enough it did. He pulled back all of those across the country because, see, Salinas was included in a review that included Phoenix, it included Baltimore, it included Washington, it included all these other places. You hear about the news on a regular basis, but you hear about black people being shot and killed. You rarely hear about the brown people that are being shot and killed in their communities. And in Salinas, where I still live today, which I call an apartheid city, because that's where all the farm workers are housed. That's where they are, and that's where they live in the shadows. And they get overlooked. And when we talk about these issues, we leave out the farm workers. And just the fact that farm workers, or people of color even, make up the greatest number of veterans that have fought in all the wars. But we don't acknowledge those things. And so I can tell you, after that review with the Department of Justice coming into Salinas, 35 police officers flew the coop prior to the department's recommendation coming out because they knew it was really bad. And the chief ultimately left, which he gave the regular, family, whatever, I'm leaving. But I can tell you, it led to a great awakening. And we have to keep our eyes vigilant. We have to not, here I am in Monterey, and we hear the lettuce curtain talk, we hear this, but it's a red line curtain that exists because it's a red-lined community, and it continues. And so I ask everyone to stay involved and don't think that it only affects someone else, some other place. What happens somewhere else ultimately ends up in our front door. And what ends up in our front door, and we haven't partnered up with our Filipino brothers or Japanese brothers or our Jewish brothers or anybody else, when we isolate ourselves, it's like the old adage, right? There's no one left. This separatism that exists, it's very well thought of. This criminal justice that we have in place is also very well thought of. Because the criminal justice system is not broken. It is working just fine. And that is to lock up people of color and profit in these no-profit prisons. So I thank you for your time today. I ask you to be involved, stay connected, every single one of us. And again, thank you to all of the great entertainment that's been here today.
Thank you, Margaret. Little change up in the program. Our Azteca dancers, the Yahuatli, have arrived. So we're going to be treated to really a beautiful blessing.
I just also want to thank everyone for being here. I'm honored to have the Azteca dancers end this program, and then we'll segue into song. Because you have to think in these hard times, how does the soul cope? How do we still find joy? And that is what music is. And so without further ado, thank you so much.
one way or another, because we had other commitments, we're going to be able to support. Because sometimes it just takes a little seed, 1, 2, or 3 people to plant that little seed, to show support, so people don't feel alone. So today, with the copal, with the huehue, our cashews, and our prayers, our gift, our tamanaliski, we came with a song. And the song that we started off with today is a song of creation. We are all one underneath our Father, Son, and our Mother Earth. There's no difference. They still provide for us equally. So the song that I sang at the very beginning is a song of creation, and to unify purpose, the reason why we're here today. In our first dance is Comanche, our Mother Earth. And she provides for us with no racism, no judgment, nothing. Provides shelter, provides us with food the way any mother should at any time. So that is the reason why we started off this way. To share, not to perform, not to present, but to share with each and every one of you. And the purpose and within our community, the things that we need to do. We just need to remind ourselves that we're all one creation, one nation, and that we're all here underneath the Father, Son, and the Mother Earth. That's why. Carmela, which is to their school. And their entire focus was dependent on what your name study said you would be. And so that's how somebody became really powerful, because they talked about love, respect, and be somebody. Go to school, learn. Nowadays, we have two types of institutions. Go to school, learn, be somebody. And then we have this other institution that says, you failed, your parents failed, you're going to go to this institution. And unfortunately, as I heard many of you speak before us coming here today, people of color, they get forgotten or lost in the systems. So this song that I wanted to sing for you talked about grandparents. And the grandparents and the way they raised their children and how they were watching their children raise their children through love, respect, and education. So I'm really sorry that I can't sing it. No, please sing it. But it's really important, so I really want to say thank you. I know you guys probably want to say some more or sing some more. Sometimes palabra within our culture, what you speak, things you share, it's quite so important. It says it sometimes just in a simple word, and I'm going to share with you. Because like I said, we didn't come to perform, to do a presentation, we came to share. And so if you guys walk away just saying, oh, we saw Aztec dancers, they're so cool, then we didn't serve our purpose. So we want to say thank you. It's a beautiful word. It shows respect. In Spanish, gracias. But in Nahuatl, it's plazo kamati. And in Nahuatl, it's more than just a thank you. It's more than just a gracias. It's translated to speak with love. So, plazo kamati. For my family, I'll probably teaching every one of you for the work, the commitment we do within our community, and the people that it reaches outside. So a lot of times we just think about, oh, I'm doing this here. We don't realize that it impacts different communities and different people throughout. So I commend you. Thank you so much. Poets, singers, musicians, performers, and dancers. Really, really does mean a lot. Let's go.
Abuelito, abuelita, yo te quiero.
Thank you for Pasuma. Did I say it correctly? Pasuma. Thank you with love. So, in June, I was in the pueblo of Lucena, which was a Jewish Sephardic pueblo, even before the Moors arrived in Andalusia. And the pueblo was, during Roman times, they weren't terribly liked by Romans because they were Jews. And then during the period of Al-Andalus, the Jews of Lucena did well and lived in tolerance, which is not the same thing as an embrace, with the Moors, and then the pueblo was wiped out in the Inquisition, which was a Holocaust. I was in the pueblo for a story. An empire was dying in the 19th century, and a Filipino sailor was among several thousand that thought that they could maybe have a better chance in going to Spain, because some of them had names. And this Filipino sailor, when he arrived in Spain, and putting it together, the only people he could find with his name who would accept him were Gitanos in Lucena, because Gitanos in Lucena were in a Jewish, it was still complicated. So the Gitanos were very more accepting of cultural pluralism, as I call it. I like that term, pluralism. So this Filipino sailor, who was mestizo, Filipino and Spanish, and then he married into a Gitano family, and he gave birth to my great-grandfather. And my great-grandfather married my great-grandmother, who was also reflective of cultural pluralism. Her history is a little bit more complicated because it involves the last group of slaves in Andalusia in the 19th century. So that historical record is a little bit more complicated. But in the pueblo, the Gitanos, who were very mixed, they were dying. The empire was dying, and there was a forced famine. And so they started hearing stories of Hawaii, that they could go to Hawaii, and it was all a trick. They got onto a ship that was 3,000 people above capacity. So you have to kind of imagine the level of oppression and poverty that they were fleeing if they were willing to get on a ship that was 3,000 people over capacity. These were my grandfather's parents, and his oldest brother, and one other sibling who died on the voyage. Their voyage and their servitude was not legal. It is what we would call human trafficking. So I am definitely reflective of the pluralism within Hispanic culture. And I can't say that I'm Gitano, but I can say I'm Andalus, and that cultural pluralism. When I was a little girl, I would say, I'm this, and I'm this, and I'm this, and I actually was right. And so my next performer, I have like an instant connection with, and it's because his grandmother was Gitano, and he grew up here. And do you guys even know what a Gitano is? Well, you heard the music earlier with Alicia Moreno. Flamenco, right? But there's a deeper connection there, and it's all about the connection to the earth. You put your hands up to connect to the sky. It's the indigenous. It's a different belief system. So I'm going to give it up to Stephen Sams, who is my compadre. Aquí. Thank you so much.
I'm Reverend Stephen Sams. A little overwhelmed because there's been so much beauty here today. You know, as somebody who's very advanced in race, and has always had kind of somewhat of a problem with, I guess, identifying as one thing with or another. I feel as though I very much belong here. And I feel like all my philosophies, although I'm not the smartest man, tend to be led by empathy and love. And, you know, a lot of my life I was asked, what are you? You know, it's just a funny question to ask me. It makes me feel like, automatically, well, in this conversation, that I must be an alien, because I'm not from here. But I feel like, you know, I was lucky enough to be born here. My ancestors, some of which were, and some of which were not, and, you know, had to be survivalists and make their way. And a lot of my family history got, I guess, lost in translation, so to speak, through things like gangsterism and, you know, who aren't the best at keeping records. But I think that separation is kind of a tool that is used against us. I think that a lot of people have been prejudiced towards me a lot, as they probably have with each and all of us here. And I know I was either not brown enough, or not white enough, or not masculine enough, or what have you. But after a while, I began to learn how to not take that personally, because I realized that separation is a tool that's used against us to ground our power. And when we learn to cast aside our differences and unify, then we are much greater in number than our oppressors. So I'd like to dedicate my set to unity. Can you hear me? All right. I'll play a song I wrote a long time ago that I haven't played actually in a very, very long time, but being here reminded me that I wrote it forever ago. So I'm going to try to, I hope it comes with it. I guess it's my song, so I would be the only one who could. I guess that's what. Look to the western, all of its gilded majesty. Kingdom takes his rhythm from the ground. Blessed are those who see the sun. They're built great big walls to the south, and they're building it high. Natives out of the native land. Crazy sun. I foresee a future of gold now. Full of roads who travel and wide. We can walk together forever and build a land that borders can define. Look to the western, all majesty, majesty. The kingdom takes his risen from the ground. Great big wall to the south, and they're building it high. Natives out of the native land. Receive the sun. I foresee a future of gold. Roads to travel and wide. We can walk together forever and build a land that borders can I find comfort in music that tells a story of struggle, and so I'm a big fan of blues. So I'm going to play the blues for you guys. I feel
lightning, baby. Shine just like gold. Why can't you give me bright, baby? Ooh, stop your train. Tell her, see you no more. Why can't you give me crying, baby? Ooh, I'm in the mood, baby. I'm the mood. When I see you walking up and down the floor, you know I get a shiver. Head down to my toes. I'm in the mood, baby. That was a medley of covers. That was Johnny Hooker and Helen Wolf, yeah. But this song is a song I wrote about 12 years ago. And I was homeless and I was displaced, and I feel a lot. When I play this song, when I no longer have, I think about all the people that still have. It's called Vignette for Vagabond and Proletariat. else is watching me. Big brother's eye is where I lie. Big brother tells daddy everything. Nothing to show. No place to go. Tell me where I go. Someone's watching me. Everybody's everybody knows I am so lost, so far from home. I am so lost, so far from
One more time. I want to call out my partner in crime, Nicole. Come on up. That because of Nicole's work in this community, in the larger Monterey, Salinas area, all this program was able to come together. We have a lot of the bank who helped us, the volunteers that were taking the money we had. Is Lydia still here? The food? Lydia, are you still up here? She already left. She did a wonderful job with catering. We had a great audience throughout the day. Those of you who stayed till the very end, we thank you because we know you're feeling every moment of it. Please, when you get back to your communities and your homes, talk about what is going on in the border. Some really distressing news today in El Paso, Texas. 19 at a Walmart in El Paso, a gunman shot and killed 19 people, mainly Raza people, and injured 40. That happened today. So there's not a lot of details about it yet, but I think we're kind of getting a picture of where it's coming from. So, you know, it's we're mourning. We just keep on mourning the loss of people as a result of this hatred, and that's why it's so important to come together in love. As many of you have mentioned, we took the stage, you came with love and compassion. We got to keep putting that out into the environment along with the stands that we take in our communities of resistance, of calling out what's going on, of not remaining silent. We've got to do that or else we're just going to slip further into the fascism that has already been in the bones of this country. So thank you so much for being part of this love and part of this outpouring for all that is going on at the border.
Thank you all for being here. I'm really grateful for Aidid and Ricardo who came from so far away to come back home. I recruited you. Thank you for Liz for spending your Saturday helping me out with collections. Thank you to Tim Thomas for just being insisting that we have the event here. So we're going to actually have the second event at the Dali Museum on September 29th in conjunction with Radio Bilingua. I am just overwhelmed and my heart is touched by the outpouring of support for the community. But I am going conclude with who this would not have been possible with and why I am the way I am, and that's about my dad. My dad was what was called an affirmative action officer for 10 years in Monterey County before the plea program was phased out. Last summer, he called me up all excited about the movie The Black Klansman. And he said, if you want to know what it was like being an affirmative action officer in Monterey County, go see that movie. And he said, just remember, the Klan was in King City. And by the way, they really would hate you because you're Hispanic and Jewish too. So my dad is 78 years old. He's been having a lot of health problems, and he's expecting me to bring him chow mein tonight. And so I'm trying to think about. It used to be Chef Louise that had the best chow mein. So if you guys have any suggestions of where I should go, That's what he likes. It's so good. So